up? Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. Today we got Dave Kornacki, the old friend and you're still the co-host.
No, definitely. You know, it's funny. I was thinking that on the way over here that you're going to call me the co-host, and there's no way.
Well, you are. I mean, you think yeah. I mean, you are. I mean, you don't have to do every.
I was
episode.
like a 3-episode co-host.
We were talking about this before the show. This idea of how now you know what it feels like to be in a band. You know, some of the other situations that was going on, and I'm like, that's the nice thing about doing podcasts or doing my Theory 6 music project, just doing things on your own, or even writing a book. Like if you're writing a book, you only have yourself to blame. You know, or playing single person sports like tennis, you don't have teammates you can blame. So I think it actually makes you step up, because if shit doesn't get done, you only have yourself to get mad at.
Right.
And I think that's I like that aspect of it, because I can stay up. I mean, last night I stayed up emailing people for to get some guests on. I haven't done that in a while, and with being busy and stuff. And it was nice just knowing that okay, I can set a time, I do it. I don't have anybody else that they have to agree with what guests I'm going to have on or what time I'm going to have them on. If somebody writes me back, I don't have to go through these whole channels to be like, oh, well, this works for me. Does this work for you? Oh, now I can get back to the guests. And there is something nice about doing things on your own. But it was funny because we were also talking about the last person I had on the show. Recently, it's weird because it's like I have all these people on the show, like Eddie Bravo and authors and filmmakers who do what they love for a living, you know? And it's just the other day, it kind of depressed me a little bit, because I'm doing what I love, but not for a living. Yeah. And it was kind of, it's kind of, it was kind of a little depressing. It was one of those things where you just kind of feel like, shit, man, I wish I could do something I enjoyed because I just can't get away from having, I can't find something that's
pays the bills.
Yeah, pays the bills that I love to do. And I feel like people who can are just so lucky. I envy them.
It's so funny. I think everyone has a point in their life when they're doing something and they have this realization I wish I could get paid to do this. You find this thing that you really enjoy doing, and the first thought is, man, I wish I could just devote my life to doing this and made a living doing this, because I really love doing this. But it's just, rarely is that the case.
Yeah, no, it is rarely the case. And I wonder how often what happens is that once you do start making a living doing it, that it doesn't feel like fun anymore. And
you know what? Work. That's a good point. I bet you're right. Because think about all the, even musicians and everything's musicians, athletes, they get caught up in all of that other stuff.
Well, I've done it where even in the winter where work slows down for me and I have some more time, and I'm like, oh, let me pop out some podcasts. So, and then once work comes and I don't really have as much time to do anything, I can really get some out there and really, while my schedule's flexible, and I'll do a bunch of podcasts and I'll do a bunch of research on, I shouldn't say research, because I'd never have anybody on that I'm not already familiar with and I'm not already a fan of their work or what they do or their opinions or whatever. But you try to
prepare.
Prepare. Yeah. And become familiar with their stuff again. You don't want to end up having a podcast looking back and saying, oh shit, I wish I brought this up, or oh, I should have, things and that happens, that happens anyways, but it happens a lot less if you prepare a little bit. But it did,
we prepared for tonight.
Yeah, which is, this is the thing about doing shows with you, and that's why I love shows like Joe Rogan's and shows that are very casual, because sometimes those are fun shows. It's you have the best conversations because you go down avenues you would have never prepared for, because you didn't know that conversation was going to go there, or something that just popped in my head reminded me of this, and then reminded you of something else, and then we go down. And I think it's when, I don't even feel comfortable when people are like, oh, what time do you want to schedule the interview? And if it's their PR guy or whoever that I'm emailing with.
Well, it's not really an interview; it's a conversation.
That's the thing. I early when I first started doing podcasts, I'd always clarify. I'm like, well, it's more like a conversation. Then I'm like, I don't know if they're not going to take me seriously. I don't want to go on this show and have a conversation. What is this, Howard Stern? They're going to play, do fart jokes.
Have you ever had anyone ask you for a list of, what questions you're going to ask beforehand?
I've had a few people. I think there's two reasons why people do that. One, it's a type of guest that I think knows a lot about a lot of different things, like a James Corbett, for example. James Corbett will sometimes ask me what topics I might hit on, because I think that he can go down so many different avenues, from from GMOs to the Federal Reserve to the banking thing to financial situations, geopolitical issues, what's going on in the Middle East, like so many different things, historical things that you just never. I'm sure he goes to a show and he never knows what people are going to ask him.
Yeah.
So I can see how he can, kind of want to know a rough idea to kind of prepare, maybe look some things up or write some things down or whatever. He's such a ball of knowledge that it's just, I had somebody Bruno actually told me recently, he's like, I think you have a better, I was talking to somebody and we kind of were talking about history and some stuff in history. And then Bruno, after the conversation, he's like, dude, I think you have a better memory than me. And I'm like, really? I'm like, I don't think so. I'm like, my memory's not that great. It just, in general, I know a lot of, some things, but when I talk to people like James Corbett, or I talk to people or even my last guest, Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson, when he talks about historical events and just policies and stuff like that, how well he knows the specifics.
Yeah, but he lived that, though. You know what I mean? When he's telling you a story about a policy or what, he worked on that.
Yeah,
he probably
that's true.
Had a hand in writing some of that policy. So when you're embedded in that or engrossed in that, or that's your livelihood, then it's really not so much a memory like you have to recall it. It's something that you do. Like when you do research on a guest or whatever, that's. When you read it, it's one thing to remember it, but when you live it, it's a different experience.
Yeah, it's weird how we consume, the way we look at the information or consume the information ends up affecting how we remember it. Because one thing I've learned a lot too is if I read something and if I stick to one story, like I kind of remember it better than if I'm. Sometimes I feel like if I kind of focus on, like, if one day I'm like, oh yeah, I want to look up a little bit more on this topic or this historical event or whatever, and I'll look into it, and I don't really, maybe that's all I really do any research on that day. Like I consume it a lot better. Sometimes I'll go on tangents where I'll just randomly just go from like this topic and I'm like, oh, and this led me to, let me look up this topic now. And you almost can't consume or hold all the information you just looked up. Like your brain just like too much, it overheats, and it just like the next day you're like, holy fuck, I don't remember anything I read last night or yesterday or whatever. And I think that's a huge issue. I think because it's so easy to find information that you can go down those rabbit holes where you almost try to read too much or consume too much, where I feel like people who read books, like when you read a book, I say people who read books like it happened like in primitive,
back in the old days when
people were riding horses and reading books. I feel like it was probably easier to consume, and of course I'm talking out of my ass, but it seems like it'd be easier to remember because you take more. It takes a little bit more focus to read. And
you're definitely more focused reading a book. But if you, like, say you go on YouTube, I've had this experience recently where you check something out on YouTube and it leads you to something else. And then that leads you to something else. And like 20 minutes later, you're on something that's completely unrelated to what you started with. But yet somehow it's related. Like something, this happens with me with music a lot. I'll watch something music related and it'll jog a memory that I've had about a certain band or whatever. And then you'll go, oh my God, I wonder, because I'm old. So a lot of the stuff that
You're not that old.
that I experienced, YouTube wasn't around for. But I'm finding, like, I'm going back and finding things that happened when I was younger that is making its way onto YouTube. Old video.
Isn't that fucking crazy?
I can't believe, like, old Lollapalooza shows and things like that.
I've looked things up too. I've looked up bands, like shows from like the early 90s, like 80s, and I'm just like, who filmed this shit? And what did they do with the film? Because you had nowhere to post it.
And how did you have it? Like, what did you keep it in a box? And
it's
like,
so weird.
Someday they will invent this thing that I will be able to upload this information. I just saw Godsmack last Friday. And
with Hell Yeah,
and
what was the other band that you said was there?
Damn,
Godsmack, Hell Yeah.
I forgot the name of this band a million times, and I feel horrible because they actually put on a great show. Cut My Life into Pieces.
Papa Roach.
Papa Roach.
Yeah.
But the next day, HD video of the show that I was at the night before is on, and I'm watching it like, oh my God, this was just on last night, and you can relive it and rewatch it. And but also stuff like from the 90s is available. It's crazy that people even were videoing back then. Now everybody has a video camera no matter what through their phone, and so there's excerpts of everything on there, but some of the video that was on there was such high quality. It's really crazy. It's
Yeah.
crazy the stuff that's out there. But
I was telling you about that documentary. I forgot the fucking name of the documentary. Holy shit! I was just talking about it. It's funny how when you put a mic in front of somebody,
Papa Roach just stole your brain.
yeah, it just. But that documentary about World War II and about World War II from the. Oh my god, this is gonna drive me crazy. I'm gonna have to look this
know
up.
what? I know what you said. I remember you. I'll never remember. It's Hailstorm or something.
Hellstorm, yeah. Hellstorm. People look it up. I haven't watched the whole thing, but it's a really interesting documentary. I think that the filmmakers might be a little. It's almost like the same critique you hear about Howard Zinn's book. Like there's a lot of people who say, yeah, that like he told a side of the story that other people didn't tell, and you didn't see, and you never hear the other side. But he was kind of biased on telling that side. But the other argument is, but you needed that to kind of level things out, balance out
what history tells us.
Well, this documentary is kind of the same thing. I actually there's a podcast I listened to, Red Ice Radio. They had the filmmaker and the author because the book came first, then the film, and it was about the Germans during World War II and what the Allies did, what the Russians did, like just all the raping, killing, and they found all this old footage, and they're like. The filmmaker was like, I could not believe how much of this footage is still alive, like that you could find with a little bit of research. And I was thinking, to having this conversation about old footage, it's amazing to think that's something that happened in World War II, that there's any footage
that there's
of
anything
and especially
was
from
recorded.
that side of the perspective, and like we were saying before the show, I was, how we always say history is written by the winners, but it's like because World War II seemed like such a like a pretty easy to understand war, like, oh, we were the good guys, they were the bad guys. We never ever think about like, holy shit, well, what if like there is another perspective, and not a perspective of saying that Hitler was a good person, because I don't think that that's necessarily what they're trying to say. Even though I didn't watch the whole documentary, so who knows? Maybe they do say at the end of the thing, like Hitler's a great guy, but it seemed like they were showing.
He's just misunderstood.
Well, the one thing that is deceiving is the idea, like people forget that he was on Time magazine. And the reason why he was on Time magazine was because after World War I, when they got their ass kicked really badly, I mean, you needed a wheelbarrow of money to buy a loaf of bread. Like people remember hearing those stories and how poor Germany was and how the whole country just went to, like, people were dying of starvation. And I mean, that's pretty sad. I mean, regardless if obviously they were doing some bad things, people have to understand that a lot of times foreign policy or what whoever's in power is trying to do doesn't mean that everybody in that country believes the same thing. When we went to Iraq, not every American thought that going to Iraq was a good idea, but a lot of other countries looked at America and we all got clumped into that. Right. It's like, oh, if you're in America and you live in America, that's your foreign policy. So we look at you like that was your decision also. And people have to remember that, not all Germans agreed with what Hitler was doing. And I think this tells that story. And I think that, I'm a big believer of two wrongs don't make a right. Actually speaking of that, this reminds me of the Boston bombing thing did you hear that? He got death.
Yep.
And I think that a lot of, it kind of makes sense that during World War II, because everybody kind of saw the Germans as the bad guys, that who the hell would feel bad for Germans if the Russians were raping and killing and, like, it's just like, no, these are the bad guys. Like, we can do this. Like, I'm not going to feel bad for them. They're evil, and it just, so I can see how things could get out of hand. And, but there's a lot of footage and a lot of fucking really, I mean, stuff that really hits you hard. Like, that's hard to watch because you see a lot of like dead bodies, a lot of there's interviews with people that were a part of this, and to hear about like, and again, not all these Germans were a part of this decision making. And a lot of people have to remember too that after World War I, when Germany was going to shit and was in a really tough situation, when Hitler got into power, he actually got them back on their feet, and like job creation went up, poverty went down, like. He was beloved not because of his hate for the Jews, but because of his love for his country and what he did for his country. And that's why he was on Time magazine. And people forget that, like, he wasn't looked at as evil dictator. He was looked at, or somebody who was trying to create a genocide of the Jews. He was really looked at as a person who's a smart politician who got his country back on his feet. And he started there. And I can see, the same way like we talked about before the show about how, power can kind of go to your head. I wonder if just like in many cases, if you work at a prison, if you're a police officer, if you're in his case, even like the strongest of all powers, you're in control of a country. How that can go to your head, and I wonder if it takes you over the steep end, where you just get to a point where just
you start assassinating people with anti-aircraft. Have you heard that?
No.
North Korea. Kim Jong Un.
Yeah, whatever his name is, the son, not the.
Yeah, he just assassinated. The story is that he's assassinated someone high up in his cabinet, and I guess
he killed his uncle. He killed his uncle.
That's the dog story where he fed him to 120 dogs.
Yeah,
like
and that was, and you know why that was? Because when his dad died, the funeral, the ceremony, he didn't feel like he cried enough. I'm like, this is how fucking crazy this dude is.
Whether this is true or not, I don't know. I mean, I guess the most recent thing,
it's not that hard to believe.
Somebody dozed off during a meeting or something like that, and took him out to a range and blew him away with anti-aircraft.
You know that guy. He reminds me of like those old karate dudes who like lived in a world where everybody at the dojo really respect him and they believe they have chi. You could see those guys.
Oh yeah.
You
talked about that.
Like where like they touch somebody and they flip because it's like you respect this guy so much that you're just doing what he wants you to do because you want. I'm like, and then all of a sudden, and there's that video online of the guy, the old like chi master who gets his ass kicked by like a almost amateur MMA fighter. Like some guy just comes up to him and punches him in his face and he's like, whoa, and he was on the ground.
I've never been punched before.
And like I feel like that's what he needs. He needs to like leave North Korea, like bring him here. Like he likes basketball, go play basketball in like Springfield or like and then have like some dude dunk on you and be like, yo, get the fuck out of here, like, and then all of a sudden he's just like, holy shit, like, because I'm sure the same way that the people there live in this fantasy that was created by him and his family, I'm sure he is a part of this fantasy. I mean, he a part of this how does it not go to your head that
like almost here in this country, any of these celebrities that we have,
he's like Justin Bieber to the max.
Yeah, but they don't, you can't really blame Justin Bieber for
well, we
he's
saw
surrounded
that
by people that tell him everything he does is right, so he's never wrong.
And that's huge, man.
Yeah,
that's I was this guy, this comedian, which is on the Joe Rogan podcast, and he used to open up for his name's oh my god, I'm so bad. What is wrong with me today? This is what happens when you work a full-time job. Like your brain turns off by this time. But Don Herrera. And he used to open up for Cher and like some musicians and stuff like that. And he said Cher would ask him like, oh, what is it like to like live out there? And like, and like all these basic things that he lived through that were normal things for him, like she was really curious about. And it makes you wonder, like, yeah, I mean, it must be a completely different life experience. Imagine. Like where everybody around you says you're the best all the time. I mean, that's what a lot of people say is Michael Jordan's problem with why he can never. The Charlotte, Hornets, now Hornets, it was the Bobcats, why they will never succeed because nobody will ever tell him, no, you shouldn't draft him, or no, you shouldn't trade him, or no, you shouldn't do this. And you have all these yes men, which can be so dangerous. And you need people to make you second guess your opinions.
Be critical,
yeah. I mean,
you're better off. The more secure you are, the more critical people you surround yourself with.
I mean, I love having people on the show that I don't necessarily agree with. I've had quite a few debates about like if voting matters. I had Jen Briner and Mariana Van Zeller both like were big believers in voting and everybody should vote. And I'm like, I don't really agree with that. And like we butt heads a little bit about that. But I love having that conversation because I don't know if I'm right. I could be absolutely wrong. And and once they state their opinion, maybe I'm like, maybe they're right. Maybe my opinion on my stance on this issue or topic is tainted or wrong or influenced by something else, and that's so important. I think you need to do that, but unfortunately most people listen and watch things that defend their points and defend what their established perspective or opinion, and don't really see things from all sides. It's like you get the guy who says I'm open-minded to, I look at things from all perspectives, and then you go to their house and are watching Fox News, and I'm like, really, it's. So it is
this world now, though. There's so much information, and people just collect. I mean, it's human nature to just collect the information that supports what you believe. So I think we're so polarized now on every issue, and nobody seems to ever be willing to vacillate from one side to the other. It's actually viewed as a weakness to change your mind. You know what I mean? Like a politician that changes their mind, that's a weakness.
You know, it's
Like,
funny when Kerry was running, and I remember when
he's a flip flopper.
He's a
I meant
flip-flop.
what I said before I said what I changed my mind to.
Well, the thing is that I don't, I didn't understand. Like, obviously, it was a great political strategy. You made this flip flopper term popular. People would use it to describe Kerry. Nobody had any substance behind it. Most people didn't even know why they were calling him a flip flopper. And I'm just like, wait, so this guy was for the Iraq war, and then he got more information, realized it was bullshit, and then made up his mind and said he was anti. Shouldn't we be clapping the fact that this guy was man enough to?
I absolutely agree with what you just said. I think that, to me, a good leader, I mean, you have to make swift, decisive action for the most part, but you need to collect good information. And if what you believe is good information turns out to not be, then you need to own it and make a change. I think listening to information and changing your mind is the most important thing a politician can do. But we were just talking upstairs about how once you put a label on this person's a Republican, automatically they have to take all the ideals of Republican or all the ideals of a Democrat, and it's hard for somebody to, you can't pick and choose the issues, and it clouds things. But I like independent thinking. If I'm always willing to change my mind if someone can convince me of something otherwise. I don't know what I have strong opinions on
That can't be changed
anyway. You know what I mean?
Like what do you have any besides Pearl Jam's the best band ever? Do you have any?
I love. You know what? I love the Foo Fighters now. I'm huge into the Foo Fighters. I'll tell you what. I saw.
You sound so late to the party. That's like saying oh, this Jimi Hendrix dude's pretty good on the
Jimmy,
guitar.
it's too bad he passed away. But you know what's funny is I was a Godsmack fan way back in the day, and to see them again recently
from local, they're from Boston.
I was really impressed with how professional these guys were, and I listened to some interviews afterwards.
Why hear Sully's ass, the singer? I heard
he
he's
seemed
such
like
a dick.
You know what? He came across as pretty cool.
Really?
And he talked about a lot of getting through stupid things that cause bands to break up and stuff like that. But we're talking about my lack of a strong opinion on anything. I don't know. I guess I'm open-minded. I don't know. I feel like I am. Like, I'm always willing to hear what other people have to say. I can't think of anything that I'm adamantly for or against right now. Even this fucking Tom Brady football thing, I'm so sick of hearing about it. But I'll sit there and listen and hear yeah, well, that's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. Like, on both sides.
Yeah.
But no, there's nobody out there that has that opinion. Like, you can clearly check off the pro Patriot and the pro Goodell. You know what I mean? Like, everybody has a position on it, and regardless of what happens, they are sticking with it. And somebody will come out and say something, and the Tom Brady defenders will say, "Oh, that's perfect. That proves the point." And the other side will say that the thing about the I guess one of the guys texted to the other guy, "Deflate and give me that jacket," and all the Deflategate people are saying, he used the word deflate. That shows you that these guys deflate footballs. And everybody's jumping on that hates the Patriots and Tom Brady. Then they come out and say, no, he meant lose weight. That's a term for losing weight. And now all the Tom Brady people are like, yeah, that totally proves it. It's insane. Nobody's listening to anybody else. And I really don't know how this is going to end.
Yeah.
I'm
actually
ridiculous.
really surprised with the issues that football has had in professional sports, but especially football, with the domestics, rapists, car accidents, drunk driving, and killing people.
It's nothing new though.
But what I'm saying is this is what they're focusing on. Are you serious? You have legit criminals in the NFL, and this is
this has gotten more attention
than almost anything.
Yeah.
But the thing is, and it's funny because I haven't listened to sports radio for the longest time. I mean, it must have been a few years before I actually sat down and listened to sports radio for a whole car ride. And I have to admit, yesterday and today, I listened to some of it, and I'm just it's kind of interesting because I know so little about this, what happened. But one thing you're talking about that and that I always look for when I'm having conversations with people is exactly what you said, and that's if somebody makes a point, if I make a point, or will they at least say, yeah, no, that that makes sense, or no, I agree with that, but this is why I don't agree
Yeah.
with you. Like
You rarely hear that.
Yeah.
You rarely hear that.
like to me, it's like once you realize that, like, because there's times where you just make a really good point. It's like they can disagree with me, but I did just make a really
Yeah.
good point. And if when you see them going like around,
They just dismiss it.
they dismiss it, or they're really trying really hard to avoid it. They're beating around the bush, or they're trying to find. They go, they're just going over and beyond to try to not give you a little bit of credit for a point you just made. That shit drives me fucking crazy, because it's happened to me recently. I had a what was a debate and turned into a kind of an argument because of the fact that, like, somebody was just like, I made a point, and it was actually about September 11th, and somebody's just like, they're like, oh, so what do you think happened? I'm like, I don't know. I just know that this doesn't make sense. I think that doesn't make sense. And they're like, well, that's ridiculous. That's so fucking ridiculous. And I'm just like, whoa, buddy.
Yeah.
Why you get like, how are you going to say my opinion's ridiculous? I'm just saying that doesn't make sense. And it's one of those things where I think that it just, there's just, once you make and especially like the flip-flop thing, like I feel like once you actually have a stance on something, how do you retract without looking weak? Like, people feel like it makes me look weak.
See, I don't think that's a weakness.
I don't either.
I guess that's my point, is I don't see that as a weakness. I think that's a strength that you're. I mean, think about this. If instead of calling someone and it's all comes down to the name you assign to something. Like even in politics, like if you call a liberal, it's the way that it's the way they get called it.
It's so weird that those words are bad.
I can say I'm liberal, and it's awesome. But if someone calls you a liberal, then you have to defend yourself.
It's so true.
It makes no sense. It's all in the way that it's assigned to you, and the words that people use and like
tree hugger,
abortion, like pro-life. Well, who's not pro-life?
I know. That
Pro-choice. Okay, we're going to combat pro-life.
We had a friend of ours who you know him, and he had a sticker on his SUV that said, "You can't be Catholic and pro-abortion." And I'm like, who the fuck? And I told him this. I'm like, who the fuck do you know that is pro-abortion? Like,
nobody's
kill all the
pro-abortion,
babies. Everybody should die. Like, kill. I'm like, what? Like, this is the Hitler.
What are you doing this weekend? I'm gonna try and get pregnant so I can kill the fetus.
Exactly. It's like, it was such a ridiculous bumper sticker that I'm just like, that is so insane. And you're right. It's that those play on words. It's like tree hugger. I mean, we all, like, I've used it. I'm guilty of it. Oh, you're fucking, like, he's being uptight because he's a tree hugger. It's like, wait, why is liking any like thing that has to do with nature, a animal or a tree, like, why is that a bad thing? Like, I can understand, like, if people go over and beyond and they get to the point where they're borderline extremists, but for the most part, like, that word is never looked at as a good thing. For
there's
the most part,
there's every opponent of every philosophy or idea has a name of what they oppose. That's negative, though. That's the strategy.
But sometimes it's the interesting thing, like you said, liberal. Like, sometimes it's the same name.
Yeah,
it's just a matter of who's saying it.
It's how it's said and how it's put on you.
I mean, if I had $1 for every time I was called a conspiracy theorist, and I'm just like. I'm like, dude, I'm not a conspiracy, and it's so dismissive that it drives me crazy.
But you can call yourself that in a way that's not it's not.
It's funny.
It's not violent.
No, because when I had Eddie Bravo on, one thing that we both have in common, we have, we both love music, we both love martial arts, and we both love conspiracies. But we talk about it, and it's cool because it means, like, oh, we're going to talk about the JFK assassination. Yeah. We're going to talk about, Oklahoma City bombing. We're going to talk about, all these things, vaccines, whatever. And it's one of those things where just like, like, we're just saying that we have this in common. Yeah. But if somebody else
you guys are conspiracy theorists. No, we're not.
Yeah,
we're not.
Exactly. We would both equally be
because I know you are, because I'm a debunker. I'm going to debunk.
That shit drives me crazy.
It's insane. But I mean, think of like a John Kerry thing, like. If someone would say, wow, John Kerry had an opinion on things and he was given more information and he really grew as a person and changed his mind.
Who the fuck would ever say that?
Like,
you'd never hear
really
it.
Like, changing your mind is growing as a person. Like think of a tree. A tree bends to get sunlight. When you are exposed to sunlight, you're going to move to that sunlight. So gaining good knowledge is growing. So changing your opinion about something is getting, constantly reassessing the information that is at hand, especially when it comes to fighting a war, especially getting into the Iraqi war. That was all like, when you think of the reasons, you talk about Colin Powell, when he gets up and testifies about things that turned out to not be true. We know there are weapons of mass destruction in there because of this or that.
The intel and yeah.
It all ends up being, what do you say? Oops,
Well, that's why I have so much respect for Lawrence Wilkerson, who was a part of, the Bush administration, and he comes out and he admits that it was a fuck up. And that's why I have so much respect for a person like that, because he's the type of person you want to have a conversation with, because it's not about winning an argument. It's not about winning a debate. He just looks at things and he says, is this right or is this wrong? According to most Republicans, they would hate him, but he's a Republican.
Yeah. But right or wrong changes based on the data you have available to you in that moment.
Absolutely. You could only have opinion based on the information you have.
And if you truly believe this guy's got weapons of mass destruction and he's a danger to the world.
And I think that's where Colonel Wilkinson comes from. I think at that time, he admits they had bad intel.
Yeah.
But I wonder, obviously, if that bad intel was on purpose. And,
and that's something you and I will never know.
Yeah, and that's
conspiracy theorists.
And that's kind of another rabbit hole. But I think at the end of the day, for the fact that he's a Republican and he gets asked to go on MSNBC quite often, and I don't know if he's ever been on Fox News after he's been in office, after he retired, and kind of was critical of the administration. So it is kind of interesting that, why not have him on? Why Fox News? Because they're Republicans, they can't admit that, that was a fuck up. I think that, and that's the thing, like, it's these teams, this tribal thing, and the whole thing is just ridiculous. And that's why it's so hard to find anybody who you can have a debate with and not let it get personal, or not let it get over the top or become an argument or whatever. And because of the fact that I think people take things personally, once people get emotional, if it's a topic that they're really passionate about, or even worse, once they have a really concrete established opinion on something, and if you're giving them information that might dictate that their lifetime long opinion is wrong,
yeah.
Holy fuck, you're changing, the whole world's turning upside down. And they're like,
about religion. That's something that people are indoctrinated from birth, and they don't even think about it.
I don't ever.
It's just automatic. So to convince someone, like George Carlin, when he talks about religion, when you hear some of the things that he used to say, it like when he looks at it from the outside, like when he takes and describes what religion, when you think about, this person who loves you so much is going to burn you, like he goes through this whole thing, and it's like, wow, when you think about that, that's really that's crazy. Some man lives in the sky. He watches everything you do, and he's going to punish you for everything that you do wrong, but he loves you. That whole thing that he does, like when you listen to that, you're like, oh my God, that's insane that people believe that. But I used to believe that, because...
Yeah, but we also used to believe in the fucking Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny.
Well, even to be more concrete,
if somebody
mythology and stuff like that, people used to believe that, and that...
Well, I think that if nobody ever told you that Santa was fake and he didn't exist, you'd be an adult who thought Santa was real. Exactly. Sorry, anybody who's listening under the age of 12. But, it's one of those things where if everybody your whole life while growing up tells you this exists, this is real, why would you have any reason to doubt it? It's kind of going back to what you said before, where you can only have an opinion based on the information you have. And if your information you have is only dictating the fact that this is real and this exists and these stories happen, then why would you ever doubt it? And then the thing is, if you believe it for so long and all of a sudden, like, you're starting to have doubts, and how hard would that be for you to take it, where it's just like your first reaction would be, this can't be. That's bullshit. No, you can't. You're not going to tell me that it doesn't exist.
Until Christmas Eve, you stay up all night long and nothing happens.
And your dad, oh my God. You see your dad putting this presents.
What are you doing? What are you doing?
Dad, why do you have cookie crumbs all over you? Are you Santa?
You're right. Why would you doubt that, especially something that you grow up believing?
Well, look at people. Okay, it's funny because you'll talk to religious people and they'll be like, I know because I can feel it, and I know, I've have a connection with them. I'm like, so do those crazy people on TV that the priest touches them and they fall on the ground and they're just speaking in tongues.
But that's crazy.
But that's exactly, and it's just like I think it's so hard for people to see things from other perspectives when they believe in something for so much and so long, and it's just there's sometimes.
I know. I just saw something right now. There were more not so much atheists, but non-believers.
Yes,
there are more non-believers than Catholics now.
Yeah, it's that number's growing. I think that for listeners who probably have been listening to these shows pretty consistently,
none of whom are Catholic, I'm sure.
I'm pretty sure we have. We probably and I mean, I've had quite a few different type of guests, so I like the fact that hopefully some of their fans listen to the show, and everybody from religious people to people who are anti-religious, and people from all aspects. But I completely forgot my thought. But what the hell? Where was I?
I was talking about the statistics that just came out on.
People and I was saying most of the listeners probably know that I got married on New Year's Eve, and the way we did the wedding, like my parents and even my wife was talking about, let's just do some type of little ceremony thing, or let's just do it at the church. We don't have to give a shit. It's just more just to keep them happy. And I'm just like, no. And I'm like, and I told my wife, I'm like, listen, if we do it, I'm pretty sure we're going to be the last generation still doing it. Like our generation, because I think that the younger crowd...
People hold on to that out of fear, though. Like, well, maybe God... What if there is a God? We need...
I don't think so. I think people do it because a lot of the reason why my wife wanted to do it, and that's to keep the family happy.
Yeah.
And it's just like, we'll do it because they did it. But
they want you to do it because they're afraid. Like
really, they want you to do it because their parents did it, and because and that's just the way you. It's like I didn't baptize my son, and it was such an issue.
Yeah.
My mom offered to pay for it, throw the party. She's like, you have to. It's a good thing, and I'm like, why? And the first couple months, my kid didn't sleep much at night and all that stuff. And, and that's completely normal. But I was waiting for my mom to be like, see, it's because you didn't baptize him. Because
he's growing a tail. Look, he's growing a tail. That's not a tail.
Start putting holes in the diaper. He's growing a tail. But, I mean, it's insane. And to do it just because to keep somebody happy just seems so ridiculous to me. And I could never just sit there and pretend that this holy water that is probably tap water, like, is doing something, and that this guy in a silly looking outfit is nothing but a guy in a silly looking outfit. It's like
tradition, and it's really born out of fear. Religion is really born out of fear, and not knowing. And I'd rather wonder than have somebody tell me this is an act of God, or you have to have faith. Like I don't know what I believe. I'm completely open-minded, and I'm open to anything. So if somebody says to me, I had this experience or that experience, I love hearing that. Like, shit happens that can't be explained. Well, most of it can be, but stuff happens that can't be explained. And I don't know. I believe in energies that exist in this world.
Oh, there's definitely things that we still don't understand. I mean, look at the placebo effect. We talked about this with Daniele Bignelli and that whole mind over back pain, and the doc.
I still haven't grabbed that book.
Yeah, it's the doctor who basically, he was a very respected back surgeon, and was basically realizing that some people who had more fucked up backs were having less pain, and some people who had less fucked up backs were having more pain. Then figured out that there must be more to the story. There might be something more that he's not picking up on, and realized that it could be personal stuff. It could be, so he kind of worked as a therapist. And when people came in, he started asking about what was going on in their lives. I forget what the number was, but a pretty high percentage of people felt better after him just talking to them, and just maybe just realizing that pain could come from somewhere else. And it kind of makes sense. So the theory is that your brain...
See, there's a perfect example of your openness. Like, you can be told by the medical world that this is the pain, this is what causes it, and that's the end of the story. But now, like, somebody looks into something, and now you're sitting here saying, hey, that kind of makes sense. Like, why would you dismiss that when somebody produces information that tells you something different than you've grown up learning? Why would you ever dismiss that? Why wouldn't you be like, wow, that's a good point. That makes sense.
Well, isn't it because if somebody has a diploma on their wall that dictates they know all, they're really knowledgeable in this topic, and now all of a sudden you're saying, well, that diploma yeah, it kind of represents some information that wasn't quite done, or there's some more information that now you're not an expert in. I think it's just one of those things where people just, I mean, it's the same issue that Graham Hancock has with historians and stuff like that. Now he comes up with these theories that, no, this civilization might be even older than you. And it's like, no, I'm an expert, and it's because I know this information. Now you're telling me the information I know is wrong. Now what am I expert in? And made up information that's wrong, So I think it's one of those personal things. I think people really take it personally. But that's a really interesting, that's another thing that we still don't understand. I just heard recently about, I was reading about knee surgeries. They had placebo knee surgeries where they cut people. They had like a certain amount of people, and I wish I knew the specifics, but if listeners know, I never do. And they had a certain amount of people, and they had half of them, they actually had knee surgery. The other half they just cut.
Oh my God, really?
And that's it.
That sounds unethical.
And it kind of does sound unethical, but I think the research is important. And the thing is that I can't remember
unless your knee was cut and the surgery wasn't performed.
Yeah, but they actually felt better. And I don't know if it was the same amount of people felt better or actually more. I think actually more people felt better and felt like they were having improvements in their knee. And that's the thing, like, so the placebo effect is something we all agree exists. And we still, till this day, have no fucking understanding on how. Like, there's no scientific peer review study that says this chemical happens when you believe in this, and then this happens, and scientifically proves that this happens, and that, and this is the steps that your body takes to produce these improvements in your feeling and nerves and pain and whatever. Like, there's nothing that dictates that or says that. And it's just like, and then we're like, oh no, that's too unbelievable, or no, that can't be. We have everything figured out. No, we don't. Like, there's still a lot of shit we don't have figured out, and still a lot of things. I mean, this whole idea of like the Mind Over Back Pain book, like that's a whole new field of understanding the human body.
But it may not. You know what though? It's new to us, but maybe in ancient civilizations, that's how they dealt with pain.
I'm sure they did. Yeah,
I mean, like I think we've come away. I think a lot of our knowledge about the human body and our minds and the power of meditation and positive thought and all that stuff was destroyed when religion came in and destroyed it all. Think about.
I don't think it's just religion. I think a lot of it has to do with capitalism and chemical companies. I think that.
Go back to the Native Americans that lived in harmony with the land back before Europeans came here. Like,
well, you mean like when the Europeans came and they're like, we want to give you this amount of money for this land, and they're like, wait, we don't own this land.
Just help
like,
yourself.
Yeah, like, what do you imagine if we still had
this? Is not ours.
But it's funny. I was thinking about this. Yeah, and that's exactly the type
Who
of thinking.
Who owns this parcel here?
But you look at it, the Native Americans were fucking right. Like, you think about it, like, who the fuck are we to say I own this piece of land?
But we destroyed all of that, and we destroyed their medicine and all those old ways. I mean, we used to burn witches. We used to, you know what I mean? Like, think about all the great internal things that people practiced that were destroyed in the name of something that was quote unquote better, Well,
the history of medicine is really, really interesting. When you start looking, and I talked about this with Nancy Gabberty, who was, she's an expert.
Yeah, she was awesome. Yeah. That was one of your best shows.
And she's, I think it's a topic I really love. And it was really one of the first topics I think that I still talk about today, that I was really passionate about when I was young, just like understanding nutrition in your body and all this stuff. And growing up, I like did all this. I just thought like, oh yeah, foods are good for you. So it makes sense that vitamins, which are made out of foods, would be good for you. Yeah. And then when you get older, like, oh no, vitamins don't cure anything. It's all fucking placebo effect. It's all bullshit. And take pharmaceutical drugs. And when you look at the history of homeopathic medicines, which is natural remedies, natural medicines, it's really interesting how they basically dismissed it, where before you had homeopathic doctors who basically were respected as much as a pharmaceutical, a doctor who wrote prescriptions. If anything, I think that they came first, and then the other doctors kind of started making a name for themselves, and it was all influenced by pharmaceutical companies. It was all influenced by the Rockefellers. I'm trying to think of the documentary that really states this really well, but if you just look it up, you can find tons of information on like the history of homeopathic medicines and how it was basically looked at as fringe science eventually. Like it at one point it was the way you heal people with natural remedies.
Even though it's sustained civilization for eternity.
Exactly. How
As
did
far
we,
back, like to cavemen.
how did
and
we
to-
make it here? Like we made it here eating shit we could
Yeah.
grow and pick,
Yeah.
and like all of a sudden you're saying like, oh no, that shit doesn't work anymore. Like, what are you talking about? Like
Yeah.
that makes zero sense. But and then they'll tell you that, oh yeah, you should eat a healthy diet because it has vitamins. Well,
Well, now our food doesn't even contain vitamins.
exactly, yeah, which is another huge issue with. And this, it's funny how being a father, and I don't know how conscious you were with your daughter growing up, but I know with me it was just like I became really tough on my wife on what she was eating because I knew the kid was eating it after he was born, when she was breastfeeding, like what she was eating then, and I'm just like, listen, I don't give a fuck what you eat afterwards, but while you while your diet is still his diet, like we're gonna eat more organic, we're gonna eat a little better, and because you just, I don't know, I just think you can't think that all that lack of nutrition doesn't have some long-term effects. And you can look at somebody who is 50, 60, have all these weird issues, health issues, all this stuff. And I wonder, I wonder if we look back at their history
Yeah.
and their family tree and wonder if their mom didn't eat well.
Just
if their
not
family,
even, you don't even have to go back that far. You can go to childhood and even adulthood. I mean, how many diseases and how many handicap placards are hanging in cars because of the way somebody chooses to consume
live their life.
food?
And how
I mean,
they-
really, I'm not being insensitive. There are a lot
fat
of
shaming, Dave. Are you
there are
fat?
there are so many health issues that are 100% diet related, that if people chose a different diet, they wouldn't be in the predicament that they're in.
I think this is one issue we've talked about before on the show, and we both absolutely agree that it's not. I mean, don't get me wrong. I understand sugar is super addictive. There's I forget what the documentary is. That is it. Fed Up that talks about the sugar addiction, and it really. There's studies that it's more addictive than like heroin.
Yeah,
and,
but it's everywhere though. That's the thing. Like,
and
how
you
do
can't prevent
quit?
it. You can say I'll stop having heroin,
Yeah.
but you can't take sugar. It's hard to take sugar
It's
out of your
everywhere.
diet. It's everywhere. Yeah.
It's once you start putting it into your system, I mean, now actually it's not everywhere. Now corn syrup is everywhere.
Yeah,
It's high
which is
fructose corn syrup,
a cheap,
is like
a cheap,
which
yeah.
is even worse. Which
Yeah.
is even worse.
and we now and there's that King Corn is the documentary about like how much corn's in our diets,
Yeah,
and
it's
like
insane.
it's insane. But addiction's a really interesting thing because there's this really interesting mouse study where they had these mice, and I can't remember if they gave them cocaine or heroin, and I think it was coke, and they had them in a cage, right? And they would basically keep going back to it, keep doing it until they fucking were like dead. And they figured out that the cage becomes a part of the experiment. This idea that, you think because you're in a lab and you put them in a cage, the only thing that's a part of this experiment is the cocaine and the mouse. You don't take in consideration the environment. So, and then they had a similar experiment where they had the mouse in a basically very lifelike environment that looked like, I'm guessing it looked like trees and like some natural habitat that it would be in, and it didn't come back and do the coke. And it makes you wonder how in the Culture High documentary that Adam Scorgiu, who's on the podcast a few times, really cool Canadian filmmaker, this doctor in his documentary says the addiction's not the problem. They're taking the substance to help cure a problem,
Right.
And it's this idea that how many people who are drug addicts or alcoholics, it's not so much they're addicted to that, they're initially addicted to that
They
substance.
have an underlying issue that has them turn to that addictive substance, whatever
it's no different than the gun issue, and how I think that one thing that we're ignoring is the fact that a lot of these people who shoot up theaters or whatever, they have other issues. Like most of them have been on pharmaceutical drugs, antidepressants, all this stuff, and what was it, Prozac in the 90s? I mean, you can find video on YouTube of people testifying that, and it's crazy. It's like I actually used some of the testimony in one of my songs and sampled it, where this woman was talking about how she had a gun pointed at her kids and her son and her husband in bed, and was about to pull the trigger and last second dropped it. And once she got off the Prozac, those feelings were gone. And like people who were suicidal, people who like killed loved ones, killed themselves, and once they were off the Prozac, they were better. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that there's a great documentary called Making a Killing, and the whole pharmaceutical industry, when it comes down to mental health, is almost complete bullshit. Because the term they keep using is chemical imbalance, which is never tested for.
Yeah.
They don't ever know how imbalanced a chemical is, which chemical is imbalanced.
Right.
You go in there, and this all goes back to the DSM, which is like the Bible of mental health. Like, it basically tells you these are the symptoms, this is what you give people, and it was all funded and sponsored by people who had links to the pharmaceutical companies.
Crazy.
And
it's crazy.
But it makes sense because when you don't really take it in consideration, but when you think about it, when you have any other medical issue, you go to the doctor, they do tests, they do X-rays, they find out what's the issue.
You have an infection because your white blood cell count
exactly.
is up. So therefore, you need antibiotics.
But when
they're not measuring anything in your brain. And
Nope.
in other words, is what you're saying.
And most people who go to a therapist or a psychologist is the one who can write prescriptions, right?
I'm not sure.
Yes,
I think it's a psychiatrist, right?
Psychiatrist is it's same thing, but one can write can write prescriptions, is considered a doctor, and the other
Okay.
ones can. So a psychiatrist only does the verbal thing, and then a psychologist is the one who can write prescriptions. Well, I hate to use the word conspiracy, but this was a real life conspiracy where they understood that the pharmaceutical companies understood if you can make a psychiatrist, which their field of work for the longest time was just trying to help people verbally, talk to them, they use those type of techniques. Now, if you can get them to write prescriptions, that'd be a green light to write a lot of fucking prescriptions. And Making a Killing is on YouTube, I believe, for free, and it's a really worthwhile documentary to check out. And it really goes through this whole thing, and it makes perfect sense because you go see basically a psychiatrist who can write prescriptions, and you say you're depressed, and then you're like, oh, well, while you're here, take this and take that. And what a lot of these chemicals do is they don't really suppress a chemical that's making you more depressed, but what it does, it just makes you almost feel nothing.
Yeah.
And that's what was going on with Prozac, was that basically almost made you emotionless, where you became a zombie. It's no different than like a lot of these kids who are on like the ADD drugs and all this stuff. Like a lot of what you hear is how, they're very calm. But what they really mean is like they don't have a personality anymore.
Yeah, you're taking away what makes us human. All those extreme emotions that we feel are what being human is all about.
I wonder how much of it's lazy parenting. Like, it's way easier if I
what I think ultimately most parents want the best thing for their kids, and
but it doesn't mean they can't be wrong.
But like you said before, I mean, you do what you think is best, and I think, like you had said before, people trust what they're told. So I think people trust the schools, they trust the doctors, they trust all these healthcare professionals that put them on this track without really knowing better. So I wouldn't say it's laziness as much as it's just not knowing better. And
when I say lazy, I think it's the easier route. I think dealing with a kid who's super hyperactive, who constantly needs attention, and then all of a sudden you give them a pill and they're calm. They're not that active.
Like, oh.
Yeah, you're like, wow, I can breathe. I can like do things.
Yeah.
So maybe it's just the easier path. But I think, and maybe you're right. Maybe it's one of those things where if they had all the information, if they knew that it could be
not only
harmful.
that, but I mean, they're being told their child is overreactive or hyperactive, whatever the case may be. Maybe that's normal, and they don't know better.
Well, first of all, I always say this: fucking kids are full of energy. Like, that's common.
Yeah.
I mean, when you see older dudes are always telling young dudes, when I was your age, I could do this and that, so you're full of energy. Now you're asking kids to like sit still, like,
and you're cramming boatloads of sugar down their throats
exactly.
nowadays, too.
So it's like, how do you expect them to, that's not, I mean, you see kittens, you see puppies, what do? They play all day. That's what they do. Like, the parents who are lazier, they sit around, but the kid, the animal version of the kids, they jump around and they're playing, they're wrestling. That's not just a made up thing. I mean, that happens with almost all species.
And that overactivity is a learning process too. So kids are learning as they play and wrestle, just like animals are.
It's so funny how just because we wear clothes and we're smarter, like we forget that we still have like instincts, like primitive instincts, animal instincts, and we're not that much different. Well, we're very different in many ways, but there's still things that are very much similar. And it's just, that's one of those aspects where...
But there's so many things that animals do better than human beings. You know what I mean? Like, we don't...
Animals are...
They're almost perfect. We should aspire to be more like them than they... we want.
So we should aspire not to wear pants and just have sex in public.
Hey, why not? Why not? But think about it. I mean, animals don't. Do animals hate? Do animals hate? An animal kills to protect itself or to eat.
Now,
but do they hate? Like, does a lion look at a zebra and say, "I hate that fucking zebra. I'm gonna go kill it." They don't. They're like, "There's food."
Yeah,
I'm gonna go.
You mean is there a KKK for zebras?
Is there?
That's what I mean. Like a bunch of lions to get together, like, no, zebras are bad, and we should.
They eat them. They're not like, listen, these zebras, man, we're trying to rest.
Taking
over
our
here.
jobs. They're taking our jobs. Lazy bastards.
There's no hate there.
Yeah.
There's no animosity, anger.
Well,
it's survival, And if another animal,
but humans, nobody's born. I mean, you put two kids together, Asian, black, Puerto Rican. They play together. They don't care. They don't see skin color. That's fucking. Racism is taught.
Yeah,
hatred
without
is
a doubt,
taught.
without a doubt, and it exists. It exists everywhere.
Now it makes you wonder, like, did it take one fucker to like start it? Because if we're all born not being racist, who's the one idiot who was born, who didn't? Nobody taught it because he was the first, and it's like the chicken and the egg.
I'm sure there's distrust among.
What I'm saying, where did it come from?
Think about it. I mean, go way back when this tribe of people ran into this tribe. I mean, when you see differences, there's probably distrust in ancient tribes.
Or what is it? What if it's a way of social control? What happened? Because this happens a lot, where you have a leader like pretend.
Well, that's what I think. That's where I think it comes from. Now, I think that naturally there's a us and them kind of thing until your eyes say this white tribe is going through some area like 1,000,000 years ago and they run across a darker skinned tribe. The first thing they're going to see is they're different. Then there's going to be interaction, and that's when they start to see similarities, and that's when they realize, wait, this is the same species as us. So I think initially there's going to be the surface difference is going to be the most apparent thing that these tribes are going to notice. But then once they're past that, they're going to realize like, oh, they have 2 arms, 2 legs, 10 fingers, 10 toes. Then they're going to start to see the similarities, and then they're going to get along and function.
I think that's a metaphor
together.
For all of us. I think we all have so much more in common than we have.
Oh, without a doubt. It's insane how
we all care about our children. We all want a safe place to live. We all want we want our kids to be safe. We care about family. We care about laughing. I had Mariana Van Zeller on, who I don't know if you saw the podcast. She has a Travel Channel show. She's a Portuguese journalist. She did Oxycontin Express. She did a lot of like good documentaries and work. And she has one called Breaking Borders, and it's a really good show. And it's about she'll basically go to a country where there's conflict. Like she went to Palestine, and she got people on this side and people on that side, and they try to get them together at a dinner table. Her co-host on the show, this guy Michael, I forget what his name is, but he's like a world famous chef. He'll get foods that kind of both sides like, make this beautiful meal, put them at a dinner table, put some alcohol, and gets them to talk. And then you realize when they're laughing and they're talking, like, they're not that much different. But
the biggest differences that we see are the most apparent, like skin color, eye color, height. The obvious differences are the first things we see. But once we get past that, it's just the shell. You know what I mean? It's like
no, but I wonder if the first racism, because like we said, like it's something you're taught. It's not something that you're born with. So it's like the chicken and the egg debate. Like what came first? Like was somebody born racist and then like taught these other people who weren't? Or the other option is, what if somebody understood that one way of getting people on my side is to get them to hate that side?
There's probably a strategy involved in that.
Absolutely.
It probably comes down to one particular type of people suppressing another type, trying to assert dominance and suppressing, and that's probably where slavery was born.
There's a great documentary that I've actually recommended to some of our friends like Kevin and Baltazar and a couple of our friends who I believe watched it and really liked it, and called State of Mind to Psychology of Control. And it goes all the way back. It's almost a historical piece about how Machiavelli and even, the Roman Empire and how all these people understood how to control groups of people. And it's like this 100 monkey theory where just like you teach one monkey to clean a fruit, then another monkey sees him do it, so he does, and another monkey. But once you get to a group of monkeys, you get to 100 monkeys, then they all do it.
Yeah.
And it's like this idea that if this many people believe in something,
I remember like podcast 1, you talking about this
Really?
exact same thing. I just had this memory of this
flashback.
Yeah, I had a flashback to check the tapes, 1 or 2. I remember this
I'm
monkey
sure.
thing. Yeah,
But it's interesting, that whole group. I mean, you see it with riots. Like if it starts getting a little violent, then all of a sudden everybody starts getting violent. It's like this whole group
mentality. The group begins to have its
this
own
group psychology,
Yeah.
and it's just like I also remember hearing people talk about how when somebody's hurt on the ground, like nobody will go up to them. People will be like, oh, somebody else will probably go up to them. Until one person actually goes and helps, and then a bunch of people will come and help.
There's truth to that. That's funny that you say that. I've actually witnessed that without ever having heard you say anything like that or having heard there's a theory behind that. That's absolutely 100% true.
You've seen what somebody
I've seen hurt people where I know people have just gone by them, and then I'll start helping them, and suddenly everyone comes out of the woodwork.
Yeah,
people that were there watching this person hurt.
It's so weird.
Once somebody gets involved, then they'll come out. And it could be, and I know that's a fact because they'll come and say, "Oh, I saw," and they'll explain what happened to cause them to be there. And like, wait a minute.
So you were here.
So you
and
saw
you
this happen,
yeah.
and they were.
That's
there.
wild. Wasn't there a huge story that made national news in Connecticut of somebody who got hit by a car and like they were in the road for a certain amount of time and nobody helped them? Like I believe I remember a story like that where I think it was Connecticut. I'm almost positive it was Connecticut, one of the towns or cities in Connecticut, where somebody got hit by a car and was on the ground for like hours before anybody actually stopped.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's fucking. And I've seen some videos in China, but I mean, you kind of expect it from like other countries, maybe, but. You figured a country like us, we'd be more sympathetic.
I don't know.
It's such a weird thing, like how it's so weird. I mean, our mentality of just like, I almost feel like we're more independent than is necessary. I don't know if necessary, but
I think we're losing our sense of compassion for other people, and we're desensitized to others people's suffering. When your government can bomb the shit out of another country and you watch it on TV and you applaud it, then you just lose that sensitivity. Like we were talking about earlier, I think it was before we started recording this, when you talk about stuff that is going on that, like what leads to what and who's wrong, who's right, two wrongs don't make a right, that kind of thing. But when you're exposed to that kind of violence and that kind of insensitivity, you lose your sense of compassion for other people. Well, I think we're talking about the marathon bomber getting
he got the death sentence. Yeah, which was really unusual in a liberal state, but I don't know enough about the case. Or I'm actually looking to have Russ Baker on, who's been on the show once. I've been meaning to email him because he was actually at like the court and he was like basically keeping up with the whole case, and I was really interested on his take on everything. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where just like it's weird when somebody does something harmful, this idea that, well, they deserve the same in return. I've had so many conversations where people are like, oh yeah, we torture, but look what they do to us. And I'm just like,
well, that's the Bible says an eye for an eye or whatever, and then another part of the Bible says,
it's all conflicts. It all conflicts.
So,
it conflicts.
I don't know.
And imagine what they left out, how much it would conflict, because so many gospels, so many messiahs, they fucking decided what was going in there. Like, and even then they couldn't get stuff that didn't conflict. So yeah, I mean, it is interesting, but I mean, there is something about this whole idea of like, oh well, we agree this is murder, but if we do it because it's justified, then it's not murder. Well, guess what? He might felt like he was justified. It's like that saying, one person's terrorist is another person's freedom fighter.
Yeah,
it's the same idea. Like, see things from different perspectives. How would we feel if somebody invaded our country, knocked down our doors, and searched through your shit?
But how do you stop it? I mean, where does it stop? How do you stop it? That's the problem that we have.
That's the important question. Yeah, that's the. I mean, I think
We can't just sit down and agree like, all right, that's enough. Just stop. That's why I don't believe in God, to be honest with you, because I don't care which God is the right God. At this point, this fucking planet is so decrepit that I don't care. Like if God has any sense of love for the people that he or she created, like it's gotten so out of hand. Like you got to come break it up and say, look, no more like theories about this and all these books. Here's the one book, like
Dude, there was a point where
it's just gone on way too long.
I was watching the news. I remember like when the Sandy Hook thing happened, the Batman theater shooting happened. Like all this stuff was in the news, and I'm like, it's happening. I'm like, I feel like this is if I was religious, this would be the beginning of the Armageddon. I'm like, you felt like every day was a huge, crazy story. You had the Virginia Tech shooting. You had the dude who didn't get laid shooting in California. You remember him?
No, I actually don't.
The dude who's like upset because he didn't, he was lonely and wasn't getting any girls, then went on a shooting spree. Pretty fucking insane. But you look at, and that's another perfect example of like compassion. Like I wonder, even somebody like him, if we just cared enough. It's such a tough situation, because I feel like my parents, if I was depressed because we had family dinners, because my parents forced me to have family time, they would have known if something was up with me.
Yeah, I think you're right.
We're like now, like being a good parent is working overtime, trying to get promoted so you can move to the suburbs and have a giant house. But your kids don't give a fuck. I made this example recently with a buddy, and really I think while I was making the example, it was hitting me like that the point I was making. I never really thought about it, and I was saying it and it made sense. And I'm just like, when you're a kid, what do you remember? You don't remember the shit people buy you.
Yeah.
You remember, the time you're throwing the ball around with dad, the time he brought you to a ball game, the time you went swimming together, you went to the beach. These experiences, these life experiences. You don't remember the expensive toy your uncle bought you because he's missed every one of your birthdays, or whatever, And I'm like, that never changes. Like when we become adults, I'm not sure the things that are really important to us ever really change. I think it's still hanging out with your friends, doing these podcasts, and being able to kind of bullshit for an hour or two. And, those nights where we're having drinks and we're laughing and giggling.
Dude, I'll tell you that at Atlantic City, I've said to people when I came back, I'm like, you know what? For me to be part of that, there's really no legitimate explanation for me to be hanging out with all you guys. You know what I mean? Like, but that had to be one of the most fun weekends of my life. Literally, like for days, my stomach hurt from laughing so hard. Like it was just insanely.
That's why when a group of guys or friends in general, women or whatever, if you can get a group of people together to go on a trip, and I know it's hard because we're all at the point where we have kids, we have personal responsibilities, full-time jobs. It's so hard, but if you can do it, and that's the thing, I think that it's way easier to just say, I can't make it, I don't have time.
Yeah,
but
and nobody gives you a heart because everybody knows
how
that.
busy you are. Yeah,
so like,
and if you're financially strapped for money, but if
everybody understands that. But if you can suck it up.
But if you can suck it up and you go, you will not regret it.
Dude,
because
I definitely could not afford it. I definitely time off for me is hard to come by. I could have used every one of those excuses.
Yeah.
But
But we're going to be talking about that shit for the rest of our lives. I mean, it's no different than like the first time we went to Vegas for my buddy's bachelor party. Like we still laugh about those stories.
Yeah.
Like we're going to be laughing about Atlantic City stories for years to come. And it's just like, those are the things you're going to look back one day. You're going to be sitting on a porch having, some scotch or whiskey, and you're going to be laughing about that shit.
What's funny is as it was happening, I was aware of that. You know what I mean? That's how you know you're having a good
you're
time.
A part of something.
Like I am. This is an epic event, and I am living it right now. And I knew as things were unfolding, but people became character. Everything about it was just insane. And I'm like, I really shouldn't be here. I have a million reasons to not be here. Like, I am so glad that I did this.
But and the thing I love too is that when you get that many friends together and you go on a trip like that, you don't have family or wives or husbands or anybody who you might have to restrict what you're saying or how silly you are because you don't want to humiliate yourself. You realize,
to me, it was about being out of the area because you can act like a total ass.
And nobody knows
And
you know.
you're like,
yeah.
nobody you see is ever going to see you again. So it's not like, oh, there's this guy who does this for a living right over there.
Yeah.
I wasn't that, you know?
Yeah.
So, I mean, we just had a ball. You
But
know?
I think that, you know, imagine like this, if people had a stress-free environment and that didn't have to be, you know, politically correct, and you could be yourself, and you could just I mean, that's how people would act. People would act silly.
Yeah.
People would make fun of each other. We would bust balls.
That's how you know. Oh, that's true friendship to me, is like just saying it and being yourself and just letting it out. When you're with somebody and you're absolutely comfortable with who you are, that's how you know you're around the right people.
Well, that's what I love about it. I don't know if it's like East Coast thing or what, but there's something about, like, I remember going out to eat. We double dated, and me and my buddy, it was actually, we went out to eat with my buddy Chris Gates and his baby's mama, and so we went out to eat or whatever, and me and Chris are just ragging on each other all night, like making fun of each other, and his girlfriend looks at us and she's like, "Is this seriously all you guys do?" And we looked at each other and we're like, "Dude, we're having a blast. Like, this is funny to us." And she didn't get it. And I'm like, we're not actually, we don't actually hate each other. We don't actually.
You know what? Gates is awesome at that stuff.
He can really take a beating. Yeah,
he can really take a beating, and he can give a good beating too.
Yeah.
Gates he's hilarious.
We only have a handful of friends that like will take it a little personal. But even then, you know, the nice thing.
Yeah, but sometimes
that's what makes it
defense
funny.
of those people, sometimes those almost like the people that can't take it make you give it to them harder. You know what I mean? And it's like
almost
a weird, it's a weird cycle.
Well,
it's weird.
Well, no, but it's true, because it's like sometimes when you know you can get a reaction, it provokes you to want to do it even more. Like, let's really get him wild up. You know, let's tell that story he hates that we tell.
Yeah,
you know?
sometimes the reaction provokes more. You know, I don't know. It's hard. The dynamic of that weekend though was just perfect.
But that's why. But that's the thing. Like, what sucks about the lifestyles we've created for ourselves is that we spend so much of our lives doing shit we have to do, and like, it sucks that weekends like that are every so often.
But that's what makes them as great as they are, because you can't do, you know.
Well, you can't do that all the time. But my point is that there shouldn't. I mean, even we had a period where, you know, it was summertime, we're going out to bars every weekend and you know, just hanging out, having drinks, laughing, and we're having a good time. And you know, you don't have to do it every night. And you're right. Maybe the fact that it doesn't happen so often, you cherish it a little more, you appreciate it a little more. But I also think that it's we should be able to have more free time to do it a little more often. I think the sad thing is that
you're good at making that happen though. You and Bruno both are like the catalysts. You're the ones that get both of you guys. And I was thinking about that. Between your wedding and Bruno's wedding, of all the people that I've met, like,
for
all the people
listeners
that
who
I've
don't know who
met,
Bruno is, Bruno's my brother, and we both got married within like the last 6 months.
Yeah. But of all the people that I met, there were so many people that were at both weddings that I'm like, damn, these are great people, and you can't. It's hard to explain it, but I could hang out with you, and you can randomly pick six guys out of the group, any six. And it's going to be a great time, and it's going to be different no matter, like, whatever six you pick, it's going to be a different kind of great time. But it's like, but you and Bruno are always the guys that are like, you know, you'll text me all the time, like, hey, I'm doing this. Hey, we're doing that. Hey, I'm going here. And you always let everybody know you're always like at the core of getting, and it's usually like 6 or 7 people that show up, and it's a different cast of characters.
I think it was a subconscious decision to try to be a collector of cool people. Like, it was like this idea of like, you meet somebody who's pretty cool. I mean, I remember Carlos, for example, one of our buddies. I played basketball with him. He's from Texas. You know, I play ball with him like every week out. You know, we're playing ball at the same spots. And one day I'm just like, you know, we'd always bullshit, and I'm like, where do you go out on weekends? What do you know, like, why don't you come have a drink with us sometime? You know, and he's like, oh, I don't do anything. I don't have any friends. I moved up from Texas. I got a wife and kids. Like, I don't do shit. And I'm like, dude, come out with us. Come hang out. he became a part of the group,
And he's awesome. He's an awesome
and,
dude.
And it's funny because we've had a couple people that we've, we fuck up. Everybody fucks up. You have a couple of characters that you're like, oh, yeah, let's give him a chance. He'll be a part of the group. And next thing you're like, holy fuck, let's get this dude out of the group. Like, he's going to screw things up because you can have that. You
know what? I know. As soon as you said that, a short timer popped into my head.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where you just, you give it a try and you're just like, dude, this dude's gonna fuck up our thing. And it's
chemistry. It's a chemistry thing. But you know what? As odd as it is to be part of this group, when the outsider tries to infiltrate it and it doesn't work out, it equally doesn't work for them either. You know what I mean? Because I know there are people that I'm sure you don't hear from anymore. I ran into a guy that we hung out with a couple times and was always like, what is this dude's story? And then I saw him. He's like, "Hey, I haven't seen you guys. Whatever." He was doing his own little thing. Like, I don't know, but the right group, the right people gravitate to this group.
I think it's so important to detach yourself from just negative shitheads from your life. I think too often we get stuck in like being friends with people that you like bring you down, or just shitheads, miserable people, and. Or you're in a relationship with somebody who's miserable and brings you down, and just like you have to detach yourself from that. I'd rather be and I think most people wouldn't, but I'd rather be lonely than have people around me that are shitty friends.
Absolutely.
But I think a lot of people aren't like that. I think a lot of people, I don't have anybody to go out and have a drink with. I only have this couple dudes who either they're moochers, or they're always complaining about shit, or they're always cock blocking or whatever, or claiming that I'm cock blocking. Not me specifically because I'm married. So if you're listening, wife, that's not a personal story, but it's one of those things. So it's just like, you get one of those dudes and it's just like, I don't have anybody else to hang out with. I'm going to hang out with this dude, or then sometimes you feel bad because, that shithead doesn't have anybody else to hang out with either. And it's just like, he doesn't realize that the reason he doesn't have anybody else to hang out with is because he's that shithead and you're the one person who's keeping him around, because that's happened too, where we'll have somebody in the group that's like, well, I keep inviting him because he does, I kind of feel bad for him. And I'm just like, well, yeah, but eventually, like, once he starts like messing things up, where going out becomes like stressful, or he's butting heads with people, or he's getting drunk and starting fights, then I think it becomes an issue, and it just ruins, like you said, it ruins the flow. And I love the fact that we can go out and we don't have friends with like big egos that we have, we'll be like, hey, what's his face is getting in a fight, we got to have his back. We're all
there's nothing like that.
And with as many different friends that we have, and as big of a group as we go out with sometimes, and as drunk as we get sometimes, you figured that would happen eventually. And
it's zero time.
I'm not. Yeah, as long as you since you've been hanging out with us more often, I don't think it's ever happened. When I was younger, in like my early 20s, we had a couple people that hung out in the group, and it was always the same people that was like, and it's just like, I'm so glad those people are out of our lives, because it's just like, I just want to go out and have a good time and go home. I don't give a fuck.
But you know what's
if
funny?
Somebody spilled shit on me. You think I'm like ready to fight some dude who I don't know how miserable his life is. I don't know if he has nothing to lose. I don't know if this dude has been like, on the edge all night.
Yeah.
If he's an angry drunk, I'm like, I am not going to fucking, so I can prove to some people I'm probably never going to see again at a bar that I'm tough, or my friends who I shouldn't have to prove that shit to in the first place. Like, no, it's not that important. Like, sorry I spilled my shit on you, or it's okay that you spilled your shit on me, and we move on. Like, but people just, they have this thing where, and it's almost like the more in shape you are, or the more intimidating you might look, like, oh, look at that dude, he looks like a fighter, he has all those tats, he has sleeves, like, what does he think, he's tough? Like, I remember once when especially when I was in my early 20s, I got in a couple confrontations with people, and I would try to avoid it. I'd always try to avoid it, but you run into the wrong dude who just like will get in your face or whatever. And my brother would be like, and this is when I was like really in shape, I was 200 pounds and like pretty lean and pretty built, and I'll be that old guy who talks about those years for the rest of my life. And I remember my brother, like, dude, I don't know, man, I never get in any confrontation. My brother was always really skinny, like, just he played basketball, didn't do any weightlifting, so he always stayed really lean and really skinny, very not intimidating looking. And then I started thinking about, I'm like, I wonder how much of it is because at that time I was getting in shape. I was at like my biggest, and I probably was pretty stupid. I would always wear like really tight clothes and things that would make my biceps look good because it helped my ego. And when I was talking to women and stuff like that. And I'm like, I wonder how much of that was just like a giant sign that said, yeah, this motherfucker thinks he's tough, so let's punk him out, you know. And then I'm like, well, Bruno doesn't get in any confrontations, and I'm like, and I wonder how much. And then it's true, because then you get a dude, and you know, and I caught myself sometimes. I'd be like, some guy would walk in, you know, it'd be like, who the fuck wears a tank top to a bar? Just, you know, he's walking around all big, and you'd be like, oh shit, my attitude towards him is probably some people's attitude towards me. But it's like this thing where we still have this primitive tendency of wanting to be the alpha male, you know, or you know, and I wonder how much of that is in us, of just wanting to be the, you know, the king of the castle, or you know, the king of the castle. Why would I quote Borat? But
king of the castle,
but I meant like just the king of the tribe or whatever.
I think, you know what, I think that's in all of us. I think there's a time and a place for that. I mean, I think that when it's, you know, you start to learn when it's important and when it's not. You know, when it's important to be in control of a situation and when it's not. You know, it's easy to walk away.
You said something that's very important, and it reminded me of this idea of how they're saying how this environment we live in today, this environment where you could be a prison officer, you can be a police officer, you can be in this environment where, because before, like you said, just like animals, you didn't get in confrontation unless it was life-threatening or you're protecting your family. And now you look at it like, if you have a gun or you have a badge, or you know, you're in a prison atmosphere and you have this power over people, it can go to your head, because you're getting in confrontations that you don't really have to think about as like, this is do or die, you know, like I'm not going to start this or get involved in this because this could be my last confrontation. And that's how it was. But, you know, you look at animals, they understand that, like, if they get in a confrontation, this could be the end. Like, they could, you know, this other animal could eat them, could kill them, could, you know, so like, I don't get involved unless it's a survival reason. And I think now, because you took that away, because now humans can get in confrontations without having to worry about like surviving, you know, and this person killing me to, you know, fighting me to the death, you know, I think that we're more likely to jump into confrontation or start it or provoke it, you know, and I think that's a part of it. I think if we were still cowboys and Indians, where, you know, you look at the, you know, when people
dueling,
I
challenge you to a duel.
Exactly. When you look at when things were like that, I'm sure there's probably, unless you're a really tough dude, you weren't getting a lot of fights, because you know, like, dude, like, there's no sheriff that's gonna give a shit if I get shot. Like, there's no, you know, like, or even if we're just tribal people, and you know, you got an issue with another tribe, I can see how you're like, I'm not gonna fight that dude, because, you know, he could fucking kill me, you know. And so you didn't get in confrontation unless you had to, and you felt like you. So I think that the lifestyle we live today, where you can honk the shit out of your horn while you're in traffic,
or you can bully somebody through electronic media nowadays.
Oh my God!
So everything's so.
I'll tell you, man. Like, this podcast obviously isn't, you know, like super popular where I'm getting like tons of hate mail or whatever, and it's, I think about some of the guests I've had on and how thick-skinned they are. Like, I mean, every time I get, my phone vibrates and I get a YouTube comment like, "Oh, you got it," like, I cringe, because I'm like, fuck, because YouTube's one of those things where like 99% of the comments are going to be negative. I mean, like, it's just, you want to talk about like group thinking. Like, one dude writes I think they did a study where they're showing that like once one person writes something negative, then like the percentage of negative comments just and it's just so like it just, I cringe, because the thing is, as much as you want to say like, I don't want to remember, or like, I don't give a fuck. Who is this dude? This could be some obese, fucking lonely parents' basement, bullshitter who just makes a living or spends his whole day writing negative shit. And usually that's the case. You look at like their feed and you're like, oh, there he goes, writing just negative shit all day. And I've gotten some shit on Twitter because Dr. Brzezinski, I got some hate shit. Some of my stuff I posted on vaccines, I'll get really quickly. And the vaccine debate is so, you want to talk about tribal thinking. People are so pro or anti-vaccines. It's like, dude, I'm not pro or anti-vax. I don't want to vaccinate everybody. Yeah. And I don't want to prevent people from getting vaccinated.
You're now in a position now with your newborn son where
this
you
is why it's an issue. Oh, this is this is a serious topic. I've butted heads with my pediatrician quite a few times because of this. Because I had a friend of ours who came over and saw my son when he was born, and his girlfriend works at Baystate, and we're talking about the vaccine thing, and she's like, I'm like, they just tell you that, like, oh, you get your vaccine this month, you should get this vaccine, and then a month later you should get these vaccines. And I'm like, they just tell you this shit. Like, there's like, they don't ever talk about any side effects. They don't talk about anything that could go wrong whatsoever. And they say it with such confidence, like, oh yeah, like it's such a normal thing that you just think that there's zero side effects and there's no harm in doing this. And then my buddy's girlfriend works at Bay State, which is a local hospital for people who don't know what Bay State is. She's like, oh, but no pediatrician will tell you that there isn't side effects. And I'm like, you're right, but no pediatrician will go out of his way to tell you unless you ask. So most people, like you said, you have this trust in this doctor, this pediatrician. They tell you your kid should take this stuff, and it just happens. I mean, Robert Kennedy Jr. Is a big activist for the flu vaccine and some of the other vaccines, and he wrote a book on thimerosal, which was it was a preservative in the flu vaccine for kids that was a mercury preservative, and it was proven to be harmful, and they took it out. And I told this to my he's like, oh, the vaccines are completely, safe. They, I don't know. He looked at me like he didn't know what I was worried about. And I'm like, one, I have a fucking newborn child that I'm responsible for. And I'm not sure I feel comfortable knowing what I know about pharmaceutical companies and how unethical they are. I'm like, if you think they're ethical, well, how about you just watch commercials when you have a lawyer that says, hey, did you take this drug and you have a loved one who died? Call us. I'm like, guess what? That fucking drug was FDA approved.
Not only that, but every drug commercial that's on TV is 5 seconds about what the drug does for you and 25 seconds about if you experience heart pain.
Oh my God, it's so. After seeing it, you're just like, how can anybody
actually temporary blindness?
You know what's funny?
Numbness in your feet.
You know what startles me? The fact that I thought those commercials would absolutely, like, first time when those commercials started becoming more common, I'm like, absolutely, this is gonna stunt profits for pharmaceutical companies, because they're going to be like, oh shit, I take that drug, and holy shit, they're listing all those side effects. Those side effects are awful.
People's minds are made up in the first 5 seconds. Ooh, really? You can help that?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, it had zero effect on it, and I'm like, how the fuck is this not stopping people from taking this drug? If I took a drug and it said that, like, if it was for something minimal, and then all of a sudden they say that suicide, anal leakage, like, all these issues, like, I'm like, why would anybody take this after
anal leakage?
Yeah, I made that up.
Oh, I got some anal leakage going on. It must be.
But my headache's gone.
but my headache's gone.
But yeah, I just got to wear a diaper. But my headache's gone. And
I don't have anxiety anymore. But see, my anus is leaking.
But this is similar to the issue we talked about, addiction. Like, we're not getting to the root cause. Like, so you have a headache, but where's the fucking doctor?
Yeah, what's really causing
What's causing it? Is it stress? Are you going through a divorce? No, you're not going to have a doctor ask you, hey, are you going through a divorce?
What did you eat today?
What did you eat today? How much water did you have? Are you having headaches because you're dehydrated?
Dehydration is the number one cause of headaches, I would imagine.
Yeah. Is it? I'm glad you said what you imagined before somebody corrected you.
I know. I was listening to your podcast, and that guy was wrong. It's not the number one cause of headaches.
You guys are uncredible.
It's number 8. I'm never listening to this show
again. You guys
are
so uncredible.
No wonder you're not a co-host.
No wonder he won't even use the label co-host. Because
personally, for me,
I think
when I don't drink
you're
enough,
absolutely
I'll
correct.
get a headache.
I think
if I eat sugar, if I eat something, and I'm not a big sweets
which will dehydrate
guy.
you.
Yeah, but if I eat too much sugar, something, like most of my headaches are food related. I'll know right away, like, oh, I shouldn't have ate that.
Dude, so much of our discomfort is food related.
Yeah.
How many times do you eat something and you're just like, oh, I don't feel good, or I feel bloated, or I don't feel like.
I have it happen the other way too, where I'm not feeling good, and I'll be like, my body needs something. I'll crave something, and then I'll somehow I'll find what it is, and then I'll be fine.
Find what it is. You're just stuffing a bunch of random stuff in your face, and
I just like start jamming food in my mouth until
that was
A, the headache is gone, or B, I get anal leakage.
Yeah, that's that's hilarious.
Oh,
but
that's not the right remedy. Now my anus is leaking.
But it's so true. Like, people don't realize that, like, cognitive thinking and ability is dictated by what you're eating. Like, that can be dictated. But it's so many, how your joints feel. So much stuff can be affected by what you eat. You eat really clean. You digest food really. For a while, I was going on this thing where I was eating just scrambled eggs, just plain eggs, and like a coffee in the morning. And it didn't fill me up for shit because it's just eggs, and eggs aren't super filling. Yeah. And but I felt awesome. Like, I was like, but I think I was used to larger breakfasts, and it kind of made me feel like I was still, I still felt hungry, and after a while your body will get used to it. That's the thing, people don't realize your body, most of the time we take in way more calories than we really need daily. When I had my son, I went a week where literally I was in the hospital, and me and my wife would share a meal, and neither of us were hungry, and the food at the hospital sucked, so we would get like breakfast, and at whatever time it was, we'd get scrambled eggs, and we would share like a little pile of and we'd be fine, and we'd live, and we survived, and I felt actually like decent because I didn't have all this food that my body was. Your body
Yeah,
works
that's true.
so hard to digest
Especially when
food.
you eat out. I grew up like if it's on your plate, you eat it. So I'll go out to eat.
That's the
and I'll get,
European
like,
way.
this
That's the thing. Yeah.
enormous mountain of food and be like, ugh, and I'll eat all of it. Like then the
My
next thing I
mom
know,
was the
it's
same
gone.
way. My mom was always like, whatever was on my plate, I had to eat. And if I didn't eat to the point where I felt like vomiting, like,
Yeah.
oh, have a little more. Oh, you're not full. It's like, well, no, I'm not like completely full, but like, do I have to be like?
You shouldn't eat till you're full.
No, that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. Isn't that your body saying like, whoa, like it's fucking, it's like that gas flying out of your gas tank because you just
Yeah.
filled it too much. I mean, and then what do they do at restaurants? Do you want some dessert? Do you want some dessert after you're full? Do you have any room for
Yeah,
dessert?
like-
Because if you have a little, this reminds me of the Greg Giraldo skit, like one of my favorite comedians. He talked about this. He's like, because if you have a little bit, any little room, we'll just stuff some fucking dessert down your throat, and it's just
Oh,
like,
man.
but it's so true. It's like they ask you, do you have any room? Like if you have,
That's what they do say. Got room for dessert?
yeah, it's like because if you have any room, we
I have
must
2
fill it.
square inches.
We must
'Cause
fill every.
You can't
inch
go with
of
space in your digestive tract.
and it's so amazing how Rogan had this guy on. I forget what his name is. I think his last name was Maxwell, who was really into nutrition and fitness and a really smart guy. And he talked about how, and he's older. He's in his, he must be in his, I think his 60s, and he's in great shape. And he did these studies on how some of the animals that live the longest eat very little and very clean.
Yeah.
And he was saying how, like, as he gets older, he's eating really clean. So he's still getting a lot of nutrition, but he's not eating a lot. So his body's not weakened by digesting food. And that makes
Yeah.
perfect fucking sense.
Especially as you get older, your need for calories decreases. But that's the other thing. We're talking about animals. Like I saw something somewhere where it said, or maybe a comedian said something about, I've never seen a wolf eat an extra sheep because he felt bad for himself. Like, think of how much emotional eating human beings do.
Oh my God. Absolutely.
Like we fill ourselves emotionally.
I mean, food is sometimes it's
there's so much comfort.
Yeah,
in comfort food.
I mean, some people, like, if we are depressed or we lost a job or got demoted, I mean, you want to have a drink. And some people, you go to food.
Yeah.
I mean, food's your comfort food. And
clearly that's happening a lot in this country now. I mean, that's what we turn
it's
to.
so hard to see. And I understand that there's some people who really do have some medical issue that they gain weight at.
No, and that's true. And clearly we're not talking about that. But
We're
think
talking
about
about
you just started talking about
We're
alcohol.
talking about the fucking fat. This is what pisses me off, and I might have said this on the last podcast with you, but it because we fat shame on this podcast quite often. But it's not fat shame, but this is the shit that drives me crazy. Is that there's a fucking person that like has lost a leg and is on crutches or has a stump or fake leg, and they're walking around. Or some people, I've seen people who, and I work construction. I'm out on the road. I see people walking around all the time. I'll see blind people with a fucking stick going down the road, right? Completely blind. Somebody could easily fucking hit them with a car. I mean, they're not Daredevil, the Marvel Comics guy who can just fight people while he's blind. These are people that I'm sure it's a struggle every day to do this. And then you see people who are born with disabilities, like their knees are in or something like that,
Yeah.
and they have these crooked walks, and you can see walking alone is a fucking struggle. And then, I'll go to a supermarket, and there'll be this obese person who parked in a handicap spot, walks into the door, hops on one of those fucking go-karts, and is roaming around. Like, you fucking lazy bitch. I'm like, how the hell can you see that person who's walking and making an effort, and for some reason either can't drive because of their disability or can't whatever, and they have to walk places, and you think that that's going to help your disability. So if being overweight is your disability, you think that walking less is going to help your
I
disability?
don't know. That actually may be a disability now. Being overweight may
It is a disability.
Is it? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's that, and it drives me absolutely. People,
It's just not for me.
it's just one of those things where I think we have to look at it as like, we look at somebody who has that disability and we say, oh, you have to work on your diet, but I think this is the same thing where it's like, okay, we're keeping with the same theme. It's not why are they eating so poorly? It's not because they don't understand that this food is good and this food's bad.
It's a lack of control.
A lack of control. I think it's a lack of maybe it's depression,
Feeding
maybe
emotions,
self. Yeah. So I'm like the same way that like a lot of, and this goes to the common theme of like, let's get to the deep root issue. Is this person eating to make up for some unhappiness in their life? The lack of friends,
They don't need a diet pill. They need a psychologist. They need
exactly
someone to talk them through what
who will
they,
give them.
Yeah.
Who will give them Prozac and then they'll blow the brains
They
out.
may have a little anal leakage, but they'll start losing weight.
It's so true. I mean, you look at it. Do we ever look at fighting obesity in any other way besides diet? No, we don't ever look at it as. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I'm talking about my ass.
A lot of it is emotional. I think you're right. Yeah.
I think
nice disclaimer.
Well,
that's how you protect yourself.
I do.
The views expressed in the Ripple podcast are really.
We should start this
out
show.
Of our ass.
We should start the show the same way Tosh.0 starts his show. You know, just with the disclaimer.
Disclaimer.
I think we do need to do that. I mean, hopefully people understand that. You know, obviously, most of the shit we're talking about is very poorly researched. You know, it's something I read somewhere.
When we say poorly, we mean not.
Not. Well,
but it's true because of our experiences. We've seen it. But it's funny because you know you talk about smokers now. Smokers are like they're viewed upon poorly in society. Like you can
because
walk up to a smoker and say, you need to quit smoking. That's bad for you. If you're an alcoholic, there's so much shame in alcoholism. Drug addicts, you know, that's embarrassing as shame.
But where are we going after this? A place that has a sign that says we sell alcohol.
Yeah.
Come have a drink, you know, and it's
and
it's okay until you go over that line.
But with eating though, eating it's an untouchable addiction. Like you can't, like they call it fat shaming. Like we talk about assigning names to things. You can't say to somebody, "Hey, suck it up and stop shoving that in your face. Don't eat till there's no room."
Will you stop talking about Chris Christie?
It's crazy though.
That's why he could never be a leader. This motherfucker doesn't even have self-control.
Yeah.
Like I think it's just it's one of those things where I think it is a lack of self-control. It takes a lot of dieting is fucking hard at first. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think that people have to understand eventually your body will adapt and dieting will actually feel good. Like you feel better, you have more energy, the foods that you're eating actually taste good, you know, you're not craving the other stuff. But at first it takes a lot of self-control and it takes a lot. And not just that, I think, you know, satisfaction is the death of desire. And I think you will appreciate a big cheat meal a lot more after you went all, like what I used to do and I don't do it quite as much anymore. But what I used to do for a long time, I used to go like Monday through Friday until Friday night, because I would go out to eat on Friday nights. But like Monday and most of Friday, I would eat really, really, really clean. I mean, I use protein bars for meal replacements. I would eat tuna out of a can. I would do shit that I absolutely didn't like doing. And then once Friday came, my mouth would be drooling, and I could not wait for that. And that fucking glass of wine, that meal, everything tastes way better than it did to the person who's sitting next to me who eats that shit all the time. Like I enjoyed it way more. I appreciated it way more. And like, you know, it's almost like you're more sensitive to the tastes and smells, or you're just paying attention to it more because you're enjoying it. And it was just, to me, I'm like, that's the way this food should taste. It shouldn't be, you know, and you enjoy it more. So if there's any incentive in eating healthy, it's the fact that the stuff that you love, you're going to love even more when you do have it, because of you're not going to have it all the time.
But I mean, really, you got to get to a point where you realize like eating should not be a source of satisfaction. You shouldn't be eating to get pleasure. Eating is a biological function. It's a biological function for survival. And what it's become is a source of, in some cases, for some people, their only source of satisfaction.
But coming from a European family where eating was about, because this thing is,
coming from a European family, that comes from working in the farm and doing physical labor all day. That's a tradition that comes from,
and you kind of earn that meal because,
you know. But no, we don't do physical shit at all. We eat more than we used to, you know.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
But if your life is empty and all you have for satisfaction is stuffing your face, that's a problem.
Oh yeah, it's an emotional thing. It's you're using it as your antidepressant, and it's a hole that you just keep digging and you just keep getting worse and you keep getting worse, and that's the thing. And the worst part when you hear stories about these things, because you hear a lot of people, and I've heard a lot of people say, well, how do you let yourself get that far? You know, like wouldn't you see yourself get like when you were half as fat as you were, like you'd be like, oh shit, I'm getting out of control. But what ends up happening is that it's a downward spiral. You see yourself gaining weight. You're unhappy and more unhappy with the way you look. So you eat more because you're unhappy with the way you
I
look.
eat because I'm fat, and I'm fat because I eat.
Exactly. You know, and I think it's this downward spiral where you end up becoming unhappy with the way you look, so you eat more, and then you become more unhappy, and then and it's just this vicious cycle where I can see how somebody can become 300 pounds and can't fit through a door because of the fact that.
But you know what? I mean, I feel bad for people that are in that position. I mean, I'm not making fun of them, anything like that.
I was making fun of them, but it was only because I was adding a little humor to the show. It's not
I
because
understand,
honestly,
and I know you, so I know what you mean. But really, that's a shitty place to be.
It is, and I think it's sad, but I think that until we start looking at it as it is a self-control thing, it is a emotional thing. And it's not
something that needs to be addressed not just through diet. It has to be addressed.
I think saying that it's a genetics thing or it's a diet thing, it's a cop out. And the other thing too is the one thing I really feel bad for is and I think this is also something we probably talked about on other shows. But when you have like, I don't even know how many hours of talking I've done that I have no idea what has been recorded or not recorded, and you just lose track of this shit. But one thing I think that's really interesting is how consistently you'll see fat parents, fat kids, because those kids, just like you teach them racism, you also teach them how to eat. When they're growing up, they don't go to the supermarket and buy shit. So they eat what's at home, what you buy. So their habits are coming from you. I remember growing up and seeing really overweight parents, and I see their kids really little, and I'm like, those kids are going to be fat for the rest of their lives because they're eating at home and they're learning to eat with their parents, and they're going to get these bad habits. They're going to have these bad cravings, and it's going to be so hard to break that cycle and get out of that. And
not only that, but I don't know that anybody is overweight and says, "Oh my God, what happened? Why did this happen to me?"
I do think so.
I don't think people say that.
I think people do say that, and then they eat more because they're.
I don't think.
Depressed.
I think that's the thing, though. I think everybody who's overweight.
Yeah, but they can't think that they look great.
They're over, but I don't.
They don't think like, oh, I'm. I
anybody that's overweight will look in the mirror. Nobody will look in the mirror and say, and wonder how it happened. You know what I mean? Obviously, you ate more calories than you burned.
No, I get that.
Like, there's nobody that just says, geez, what?
Not if they're being honest.
This is a mystery. This is a mystery to me.
I woke up and I had.
Why am I this way?
I woke up and I had breasts. What happened?
Yeah, like what? Why is
my name Bruce
Why
Jenner?
is my body not fit? It makes no sense.
Yeah,
like,
no, you're
clearly,
right.
You need to exercise and you need to eat healthy. And everybody knows that. Everybody knows that. When you go to the grocery store and there is this cereal A and there's cereal B, and you pick cereal B because of the nice cartoon on it,
and the
marshmallows, loaded with marshmallow. Yeah. I mean, marshmallow. Seriously, fucking marshmallow. You're eating cereal with marshmallows in it, like a marshmallow.
Well, there's not many cereals that are good for you in the first place.
No, but I'm saying, but there are some that are extremely bad for you.
Yeah, that are,
and those are the ones that contain marshmallow. Like, when did marshmallow become an ingredient in cereal? But marshmallow.
But this goes back to sugar being addictive. I mean, I wonder how much of this is like, let's find more creative ways to add more sugar in this shit, and kids become.
But you're right.
Joe Rogan talked about this. Not to keep quoting Joe Rogan, but he was talking, and it's so true. He had a birthday party for his daughter, and like they were talking about sugar addiction and how once they're like, oh, the cake's out, you see all these kids' eyes get open, and they're like, cake. Oh, can you give me a bigger piece? Can you? It's like,
I want the flour.
Exactly, and it's just like you realize how serious of an issue it is, and how that addiction. I mean, that's something they end up having. And look at the way what do they market to kids? Fucking shit with full of sugar. Yeah. I mean, you don't see people marketing like, fucking carrots. You don't see people marketing. I mean,
and you feed your kid healthy, and you're in society, you're depriving you don't take your kid to McDonald's. You're depriving your child of
That's
McDonald's.
So true too.
Like, seriously, society looks at things so
Didn't Nancy
backwards.
Gerberti say that? She said that she would bring her son play soccer or something like that. She would bring like healthy snacks, and other parents would look at her like,
why don't you let your kid be a kid?
Yeah, and what does that mean? Yeah. Like,
you know what, they may have a shit ton of energy and be able to run it off, and not get fat as a child because they're so active, but at some point, because that's what they recognize as nutrients. You know what I mean? Like that's a habit. At some point it's going to catch up to you. You know, like I don't care what, at my age, it's so much harder for me to be healthy than it was. Like I'll go to my gym and I'll see 20-year-olds throwing crazy weight around. They're lean as hell and strong as hell. And I'm like, man, I remember those days. Like they probably stopped at McDonald's on their way in. And I used to do stuff like it's so, the older you get, you're constantly fighting your metabolism. It's
Your
just
metabolism
not,
slows down. The way
Yeah.
you digest food,
everything.
Yeah,
It's so much harder. You have to constantly be aware of, you know, like my diet now has changed from what it was last year. Like you really have to stay on top of that, and you have to stay on top of what you do exercise wise to avoid injury and adjust to it. Like you have to continually ask yourself, what feels good to me at this stage of my life? And it's constantly changing, you know?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, you almost are in a chemistry class, and you're trying to figure out
Yeah.
what ingredients and what causes
And there's no
what.
there's no formula for anybody.
Everybody's a little different. I mean,
Yeah.
some things are universally, like for the most part,
There's
this
general
works.
guidelines.
Yeah, general
Yeah.
guidelines. But you definitely have to tweak different things. I mean, there's things that work for some people that don't work for others.
Yeah.
And that's all stuff you have to figure out. But it all comes down to, I think this all comes down to self-control. And you have the self-control to even try to figure that shit out. Most people would be like, yo, that is way too much work. I'm not going to fucking count calories or look for the organic food or try to find a healthy way to make this meal. Like it's just easy to like when you're busy to just, let me just do what's quick.
I was motivated by losing my brother. My brother was only 35 when he died, and he was a healthy guy, you know? So I remember thinking like, man, if my healthy brother can die at 35, I got to do everything I can to stay healthy, you know, because the odds are against us surviving anyway, you know, even healthy. So why would I contribute to my own demise?
Well, that's the debate that a lot of people like. I have like family members who will say, "Oh, you can eat healthy, you can take vitamins, but look at this person who did all that and died young." And I'm just like, yeah, but there's things that you can and cannot control.
Right.
Now, you do your best to try to, if I do everything in my power to try to eat healthy and take my vitamins and exercise, and then some rare disease or something that I couldn't control ends up killing me, then that it is what it is. But if something ends up harming me and I end up passing away based on something I could have changed, something that I could have had some effect on by eating healthier or better, like absolutely.
Not only that, but the quality of life. Like I'm 44 at my age. Most people my age aren't as active as I am, or as happy as I am, or as able to do a lot of the things that I am. And a lot of that is lucky. I'm lucky that I haven't had injury. I mean, I've had injuries, but I haven't had any major injuries.
And you weren't born with a disability.
Yeah. And a lot of that is luck and good fortune and whatever, but I still want to do everything I can, not only just to live longer, but it improves the quality of my life. When I do stuff with my daughter, when I'm running around or hiking, I don't want to sit every 10 feet and be catching my breath. I want to be, I want to outrun my daughter. I want to outswim my daughter. I want her to be the one to say, "Daddy, I need a break," rather than, "Honey, can we just sit here?" You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to be that.
Well, I think quality of life is an important thing. We always talk about how long somebody lived till, but we never talk about like what was their quality of life to that age. That's something that you never hear about. It's never like, oh, he lived till 100, but at like 70, he was completely unable to do anything, or he was living in pain.
But those people don't live to be 100. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, you get some people who live a while with completely fucked up bodies and are on, taking painkillers and are going to the doctors all the time for this and that. And, the one thing our pharmaceutical, industry does really well is keeping you sick and alive.
Yeah.
It's like they don't cure anything, but it will keep you sick.
Just good enough to make your next physical so you can get another prescription.
Yeah. It's so, and that's the thing. Having a child, there's so many things from like trying to have a vaginal birth, because we understand like all the research I did on how quickly they jump to C-sections now, like the percentage of C-sections from like 70-80% now, where like in the 70s it was like 30%.
Wow.
And a lot of it has to do with the fact that, our lifestyles, like how busy we are and how doctors are on call, right? And they can either wait there and wait 2 days of you being in labor, and be there all day, and or you can decide to have a C-section, and in a couple hours they're home and watching. They get to watch Mad Men or
whatever,
King of Thrones or whatever, and they get home for their favorite show. Like, why wouldn't they tell you? Like, yeah, maybe you should. It happened to us. Like we were, and don't get me wrong, our doctor was awesome, our surgeon was awesome, but she was tired as fuck. And between contractions, she was sleeping. Like between contractions, she would close her eyes and sleep because she was so tired. And it got to the point where she, pretty quickly, she's like, you guys should really think about, a C-section and this, that. I'm like, honestly, and mostly it was because I understood that it was easier for her to recover, my wife to recover, for Gina to recover from, a vaginal birth. And there's something, I guess there's a natural process to it. Like your body produces breast milk quicker because it went through the natural process, and because it knows, like, oh yeah, I just gave birth to something, I have to feed it. When you have a C-section, it takes longer for you to produce milk because your body, because you skipped a step. You're just like, oh shit, like I don't understand like what just happened. Did I give birth to something? And so you realize like that natural process is somewhat important. Also that once you put the child on you right after you have the vaginal birth, that connection, that's really important. They say that like it's what bonds the child to the mother, and just so it's a lot. And also when a woman gives a vaginal birth, like when it's kind of a disgusting example, but the nurse is like, or the midwife actually that I was talking to, because they actually have midwives there who will talk to you. She was saying it's like being really constipated, and all of a sudden like you're in a lot of pain, but once it's out and once you that release is gone, you're like, it was the best feeling ever. She's like, that's how giving a vaginal natural birth would be like. She's like, it would hurt really bad, but once that's out, she's like, it'd be the best feeling ever. Where like when you have a C-section, you're numb, you don't feel anything, and you don't get that enjoyment. And actually, I've seen, I read somewhere, and I don't know if this is true or not, but it kind of makes sense that because of the natural steps, there's a less chance of postpartum depression too, which is a real fucking thing. Like I didn't realize how serious that was.
I mean, talk about chemical imbalances and things like
God.
that. Like think about the role hormones play.
Dude, my wife was like, one day we had friends over and we're talking about postpartum, and she's like, yeah, I've been crying every day. And I'm just like, I looked at her and I'm like, what? I'm like, what are you, like, she never told me this. She was like, when I wasn't home or whatever. And I'm like, wait, what? I'm like, what just happened? I'm like, this is a woman who literally, she was the happiest pregnant woman ever. She was so excited to meet the little guy. She just gave birth to her first son, her first child. Always wanted a child. Was super happy. Like should be fucking ecstatic, and is going through postpartum. And it's just like, I'm like, this can't be right. Like this. Well, like what is like? And then you realize, you start talking to people. Once she opened up to it, other people that would come visit us at home after we had our son would, like other mothers who had children would also say, oh yeah, I had it really bad, or I couldn't. We know people who couldn't hold their own child for weeks because they're so, like, they just gave birth. They should be happy as fuck. And you see this big-eyed, helpless thing that needs your help, and they want nothing to do with it. I'm like, to me, it was, because being a male and not going through that, it seems so surreal. I'm like, how is that even possible? I felt the complete opposite. I could not, like, I loved this thing so much. I was happy as happy could be. And to know that, like, this beautiful experience we should be sharing together is kind of, it makes it a little less enjoyable knowing that somebody else isn't experiencing it the same way you are.
Yeah.
It's kind of sad, and she got over it, obviously, and everything's fine. But to know how often that happens is amazing, and it just adds to the layers of the amazing journey a woman takes when she gets pregnant. Like, this is just one more of the amazing tests that your body goes through, that you go through.
It's really unfathomable to a man, dude, to even know.
We talked about this, just the respect we have for our baby mamas. There's
no way we can ever possibly really fully understand that.
And it's funny. It's funny because the one thing I love about my wife's perspective on it is that she doesn't look. Some people are like, oh, I had a child and you'll never understand, or they say the common joke like, oh, guys should be having kids. It sucks that we're the ones who have to go through all that pain. She looks at it completely different. She looks at it as like, it was a privilege to give birth to this and to be one with this thing and have this beautiful thing happen all naturally, where you grow a person in you, and all of a sudden this person is out, and you didn't just give this person life, but now you're producing its milk, its food, and you have this bond where it's just like, she looked at it in a way that, like, a lot of times growing up, you'd hear women, guys talk and women talk, and they'd be like, oh yeah, it's, guys are lucky because they're not the ones who have to do it. And it's just like, she looked at it as like it was a privilege, and it was and you know what, witnessing it and being a part of it, I could and see how beautiful the whole thing is. You can see how, like, if you're a female, how even though it's painful and it's stressful and all these things, like, you can see how you don't see it as, most women don't see it as it's this painful thing that they wish they could pawn off to somebody else, but it's a beautiful thing that they absolutely adore and are lucky to be able to have this experience. And I mean, it's a journey, man. But I'll tell you, if anybody in their teens and are listening to this, or early 20s, your parents do not have anything figured out. Like, they're still figuring shit out. We're all still figuring shit out. I remember growing up, and I just had this, and I don't know if it was this false perspective of, like, my parents would always be so sure of everything they told me, and I'm just like, damn, man, they act like I don't know shit, and they got everything figured out. And don't get me wrong, obviously there's shit that comes with age, and every year I think I really have shit figured out, and then the next year comes and I'm like, holy shit, I was a shithead last year who had nothing figured out. So you realize you should always be progressing and learning. But the idea that, like, your parents have everything figured out and, like, know the right way of teaching you things or whatever, like, you realize that, like, no, I mean, there's not really, there's definitely wrong ways of doing things, but there's a whole lot of different right ways of doing things, you know? And I think that's one thing we learn. And I think not having this rite of passage, or not having a quiz or you're like, wait, what the fuck did I do to earn to be a parent? Like, I didn't earn this privilege of being a parent. I didn't do it. Like, one day, the day before my kid's born,
it's just boom.
Like, the day before, I'm going to the gym at my own schedule. I'm eating what I want. I'm doing whatever the fuck I want, and then all of a sudden the next day I'm like, holy shit, like, my whole life just changed, and I have to.
Yeah, there's more going into getting your driver's license than
man. And it's just like your whole world turns upside down, and it's just like there's nothing that there's no baby steps. It's almost like the buddies who go from, like, sober to hammered. It's like, there's no in between,
there's no progression.
It's like all of a sudden, but we'll talk more about that next time. We got to get some grub. But thanks, Dave, for being a part of another
Thanks for having me
show.
again. Thanks for not bailing on me. What the people that listen don't know is, like, for every show that I do, you ask me 400,000 times before I finally come around, and I always have a great time doing it.
This is episode 73, and it's I'll tell you, man, it's pretty amazing how far this thing has come. I mean, I get people asking me, oh, who's your biggest, actually at my brother's wedding at our table, people were asking me, like, oh, who's the biggest guest you had on your show? And I'm like, first I have a brain fart, and I'm like, because I'm like, I don't know who's big to them. To me, I have people that I really respect and like. But then once I start naming people and I start telling them, like, what they've done or whatever, and I'm just like, this is fucking.
You've landed some seriously.
This is surreal.
Things,
I mean, it's surreal to think that Rick Ross. You're talking about one of the biggest fucking drug traffickers in U.S. history. You're talking about Abraham Bolden. I mean, the chief of staff for fucking Colin Powell had a conversation with a kid who was in special ed. Yeah. Like, are you serious?
That is amazing.
Luckily, that's not on my resume. They don't put, like, oh, what's your college education? None, not available. What's your? But it's awesome that these people give me this chance to talk to them.
Yeah.
And they don't. It's a beautiful thing. I mean, Dr. Brzezinski. I still look back and I'm like, I cannot believe how many episodes ago that was. And I think
caught him early on too. That
real
was
early.
Amazing.
I'm like, I did not deserve to have him on, but it was such a privilege to have him on. And it was one of those times where I don't know if you felt that way, but, like, I remember seeing him on the screen, like, on the Skype, and I'm just like,
I can't believe that.
I'm like, and I'm looking around, I'm like, dude, I'm in a fucking basement, and I'm talking to a dude who's been on Oprah, who's been on Dr. Oz, who's been on fucking, on the front of, of every newspaper for his battle with the FDA, and it's just like he's having a conversation with me, like, it's so crazy. But this is a perfect example of people who are listening who think that, oh, I couldn't do that, or like, oh, I got lucky, maybe I got lucky, maybe it was timing, maybe it wasn't. It was a lot of just OCD and starting something and wanting to
man,
get it.
You talked about this for the longest time.
We talked about this. Early episodes, we talked about how silly it was. Oh, maybe we'll get guests, and to look back and be, dude, I had somebody on. I mean, I had Mariana Van Zeller on, who has that show on Travel Channel. And, I directly talked to her at first, but she's like, I'm under contract with Travel Channel. So you have to talk to Travel Channel's PR to book, they have to schedule the show. She's like, they'll do like a background, or not a background, but they'll check up on the show and stuff like that. And I'm emailing this person from Travel Channel's PR, and I'm just like, this is fucking insane. Wow. I don't even have a secretary, and I'm talking to somebody who works for PR for a huge fucking channel.
That's cool.
And same thing with Ben Bowlen. When Ben Bowlen was on from stuff they didn't want to know, they're linked to Discovery Channel, I believe.
Yeah.
So like they had to have their guys look up, and I'm just like, this is insane, And so just I think it's so important for people to follow their passions, and I know it's a common theme I say over and over again. But you meet people who do things that they love. I met a guy who works at a job site that we're working at. He's a Mass DOT inspector. He works for the state, and we're doing a state job. And, this guy, kind of quiet guy, really wasn't very personable. Not he was never rude, but he never really, you couldn't get him talking, And I'm like, dude, he must be into something. He wasn't into sports, which is a common thing on a construction job site. Everybody fucking watch sports. They're all like blue collar dudes who get their hands dirty. And he wasn't into. Then all of a sudden, I don't know how it came up, but I found out that this guy was what do they call it? Like a bee master, or the people who have the
Is
that what they call
a beekeeper, bee husbandry?
Yeah, whatever it's called, and that's what he does. And I'm like, are you fucking serious? And I was so intrigued. I'm like, oh, what's your opinion on the vanishing of the bees? Like, they're disappearing. Oh, what the fuck do they do during the winter? And he's talking. You could see he's lighting up, and he's really enjoys this. He talks about like sitting in his backyard and like, because he doesn't use any equipment. Every once in a while he'll use a thing on his head. He'll put his hands in the fucking hives.
Wow.
Like it's amazing. And you see, and it was just so intriguing, and you get this guy talking, and you're like, he fucking really enjoys this. And you could see if this dude did this for a living, he'd be the happiest guy on earth. Unfortunately, he doesn't, he doesn't know how to make money doing it. You have to make a lot of honey or whatever, there's probably not a whole lot of money in that. And unless you have like these factory farms, he explained it to me with like, where they tons of, but a lot, but it's amazing if we actually spend more time doing things we enjoy, how much happier of a world we live in, and you wonder how much of that road rage, how much of the person who's screaming because, at the person at their Starbucks register because they mess up their coffee, how much of that anger. And this is the theme of the show, is deep rooted. It's deeper than just meets the eye. It's deeper than just a diet. It's deeper than it's deeper than just taking a pill, or addiction. It's deep rooted, and I think that's something we all have to take in consideration. Is this unhappy life we live, and it's so important not to let adult responsibilities and the routine, you talked about how, I'm so good at like getting people together, because I know how quickly I could lose everything. I know how quickly, if I stop texting people, I stop trying to gather people together, everybody will go down their own paths. Everybody will go down their own routes. You'll end up getting occupied with work or finding a girl and then disappearing. And my group of friends will disappear. We'll be guys who we run into at the, Napa every once in a while, or, and
Big Y.
Big Y, and talk about, what have you been up to, and, this and that. And then we go our separate ways. And it's just like, to me, it's so important to at least have somebody who can keep people together, keep people connected, and do that. So I just, that's one of the reasons, because I think one of the things that really fucking scares me is like losing this. People are always like, like you said, we have a great group of friends. But I know that can change really quick. And
that's true, man. Especially now, like, people getting married, having kids.
Well, that's why people make excuses like, I have kids, or give them a break, because you could still find some time. Like, you don't tell. I mean, I'm married now. I have kids. Absolutely, I understand how fucking hard it is to do anything. But to say that you can't find some time.
I don't think I've heard from you less as a result of you being married and having.
I mean, I definitely haven't gone out quite as much, because obviously, like, it'd be kind of a shithead move to go out every week and leave the wife with the kid at home. But honestly, I love being with him. So like, it's not, it's not a bad thing staying home with him, and, but it's just, but I still understand that as much as I want to be in his life 24/7, I also love the fact that I have great friends that I've been through a whole lot with, who we've had amazing experiences together. And I don't want that to end either, and I think that if you can balance it all out, obviously you have to put, this is a bigger priority, so you have to put that higher on the list a little bit. But it doesn't mean you completely just erase, that priority of hanging out with your friends. And I think that's just really important. I think that hopefully we continue this, and as we're having more friends get married and have kids, hopefully, people will keep with the same theme, because if we can, though, it will be really fun to be able to grow together and go through these experiences together, and not just talk about childhood experiences, but experiences as adults. And that's one thing I love about getting old. I love like the fact that we're figuring shit out together. We're all growing together. Like things that we thought were important, we realize aren't important anymore. We don't care about getting in a fight at a bar and like, you know, so to help build my ego. We don't care about, you know, how big our friend's house is or how successful financially our friend is. We have friends that are broke. We have friends that have good jobs. It doesn't fucking matter to us. And like that's stuff that seems more important when you're young. Oh, you got to have a good group, good looking group. You know, I want to hang out with dudes that are good looking because then I look cool when I'm at the bar with my buddies and we're all like really fashionable and like none of that shit is important, you know. And I think as you get older, you figure that shit out. And you know, that's the reason I love drinking scotch and having cigars, because you sit together and none of that shit matters, you know. So you know, I guess it wouldn't be a podcast if I didn't go on one rant. So that was it.
It's usually at the end when I run out of gas.
I'm like, must fill in time. Dave's trying to end this.
But you know what? We definitely got to do it again. I won't be as long between.
Yeah. I love these shows. I love how casual they are. I love that there's no preparation needed, and it's just. And it's an excuse to catch up with you.
Yeah,
you know?
this was definitely cool. And really, this is how this whole thing was born.
Yeah,
from just shooting shit. And
exactly.
Talking.
And really, like, you know, I know sometimes you're like, oh, you know, I remember I one time I was send you screenshots of like one of the episodes when you came back. And I'm like, see, people are downloading. You're like, nobody's going to listen now. You just had a bunch of cool guests. Who's going to listen to the show of us? But people actually like our shows. And I think it's a great, you know, the same way we talked about, I don't know if we talked about on air or off air, about if you get too involved in talking about negative things and the depressing things in life, it can be depressing. And I think these shows are always a little bit more upbeat. They're more all over the place. And I think that, you know, it's something that people could listen to, and they don't have to take it that seriously, you know, because I mean, one, they can't, because most of our statistics are wrong, and I can't ever finish a quote correctly. So, you know, how seriously can you take the show when you get a host who doesn't take it that, you know, you just can't take yourself that seriously.
Yeah, it's perfect.
I'm glad. So, thanks everybody for listening. I was bouncing the idea of maybe one day doing a live show where we'll stream it on YouTube. And if people want to tweet us or something, so I might as well put this out there just in case one day we do want to do it, and so people know that, you know, keep a lookout for it. You know, if I can figure out how to do it and it's fairly simple, and I think it is, then we'll do a live show and we'll just do what we're doing now. Maybe just keep our phones next to us or a laptop on and just check our Twitter feed. And if people want to correct us on the many mess ups of statistics we do, or
give us the full quote,
give us a full quote and do it. Or if there's something you think you want us to expand on or whatever, it'll be fun to kind of get some feedback from some fans. So people are definitely listening. And one thing is that I would love to try to find a way to do is try to get the fans to interact more, because I feel like people are downloading. I mean, I look at the statistics, you know, hundreds of downloads in this city, hundreds of downloads in that city, thousands of downloads in that. And I'm like, who are these people? Like, I don't hear from them. You know, every once in a while I'll see a YouTube comment. It's like, I've talked to my wife about this. I'm like, it's weird because I almost don't feel like people are listening, because I don't have one of those shows that people have much feedback. You know, people don't tweet me much about, I mean, I do have, every once in a while somebody will tweet me. I had somebody tweet me before my last show, like, can't wait for the next show, you know, this and that. And, but it's rare, you know, and it's just like, it'd be nice to know, like, who's out there, who's listening to this shit. But I guess maybe it's nice not to know, because you don't feel like anybody's listening, so you don't have any pressure, you know, so that's nice too. But it is nice to kind of get some feedback and let everybody know we appreciate the fact that people are actually enjoying these conversations and talking. And there's a lot of unlucky people out there who don't have friends like I do who can sit down and have these type of conversations. So I feel very grateful that I can even have a friend to do this with. I mean, if I didn't have you, I'd really be struggling to find somebody who I could actually sit down and have an enjoyable 1-2 hour conversation. Now you're stretching
it. I already said I'd come back, so you don't have to.
Well, I'm not, you know, I'm not just trying to, you know, jerk you off. I'm being honest. You know, it's true. And I think that's why when I started the show, I knew you'd be the perfect person to do it with, because so many of our conversations were podcasts that just were never recorded.
It really is. It always is.
Well, thanks again, guys, and we'll see you on your next one, or on our next one. And you know, keep a lookout for possibly doing a live show. That'd be something interesting. It might be something worth trying. So see you on the next one. Peace.
Believe in the ripple effect.